Your Honor, during the break, I was informed that Ms. White is going to be the person from the District Attorney's Office handling these two witnesses. I'd like to make a statement to the court for the jury to understand and for everyone to understand that I am calling Detective Kennedy now so that he may testify as to part of the confession given by Mr. Dahmer. He's going to testify to the early part of the confession that was given by Mr. Dahmer, that subsequent to a certain period of time, Detective Murphy came in on the case, and that he and Detective Kennedy then took most of the other statements from Mr. Dahmer. We are only going to go through the part where Mr. Kennedy was alone, and then we are going to dismiss him with the understanding that the state will be calling him back later for other reasons. Then I'm going to call Detective Murphy to the stand to continue the giving of the confession that was taken by Mr. Dahmer. I am therefore at this time going to ask some preliminary questions, and I'm going to ask that the entire confession be marked as an exhibit, and if it is going to be received, I'm going to ask the court to hold that it not be shown until such time as we get a chance to clean up some of the underlining and things of that nature. So I'd ask that the entire confession that's going to be talked about by Detective Kennedy, Detective Murphy, be marked as
It's all correct.
Just so the record's clear, I'm showing you Defendant's Exhibit Number 1 for identification, and I ask you, if you look at that briefly, do you know that to be the confession that you and Detective Murphy took from Jeffrey Dahmer, and especially the first 4 pages as being part of that confession, with you personally took from Mr. Dahmer while Detective Murphy was not present?
That's correct, sir.
And as far as you're concerned, you've had opportunity to look at this confession in total?
Yes, sir, I have.
And the documents that I showed you, the confession that was taken?
Yes, sir, it is.
I move, Your Honor, that it be received in the evidence as Defendant's Exhibit 1, the confession given by Mr. Dahmer to the Milwaukee Police Department over a period of days, which will be identified as we go along, with the understanding that I will have an opportunity to remove superfluous things from this document that do not have any relevancy to the issue before this court in this year.
Your Honor, the state has no objection to the admission, the reservation of those extraneous matters in the confession being removed. We're doing that.
The evidence, but I'm going to have a stipulation as to anything that's to be removed.
We're working on that and doing that.
Detective Kennedy, you're a member of the Milwaukee Police Department?
Yes, sir, I am.
For what period of time have you been so employed?
12 years.
And when did you join the Milwaukee Police Department?
In March of 1980.
And what age were you when you joined the police department?
26 years old.
Prior to joining the police department, what, if anything, did you do?
I worked for the state running halfway houses for delinquent youths.
When did you become a detective of the Milwaukee Police Department?
Not quite 3 years ago.
And since that time, you've been functioning as a detective with the department?
That's correct, sir.
There come a time on July the 23rd, 1991, while in the course of your official duties as a detective of the Milwaukee Police Department, you came across the person of Jeffrey Dahmer, he being the gentleman seated next to my associate, Wendy Patrick.
Yes, sir, that's true.
Let the record reflect that Detective Kennedy has identified Mr. Dahmer. Detective Kennedy, what were the circumstances under which you became aware of Mr. Dahmer, and would you tell the court and the jury how that came about, please?
I was working on a homicide squad on the late shift. My partner, Michael Dubas, and myself were sent to Mr. Dahmer's apartment to investigate a head which was found in the refrigerator.
And that apartment was located at 924 North 25th Street in the city and county of Milwaukee? That's
correct, sir.
What apartment was Mr. Dahmer's apartment? What was the number?
Number 213.
Did you have occasion at that time to make some observations concerning that apartment?
Yes, sir, I did.
But since I've already informed everyone here that we're going to only talk about the statement, we'll limit that aspect of your testimony there, okay?
Yes, sir.
All right. Did you start talking to Mr. Dahmer about anything?
While I was in the apartment, sir?
Yes, sir.
No, sir.
Did you have occasion to transport him from the apartment?
Yes, sir, I did.
And who did you transport him with?
In a Milwaukee police van, which is used to convey prisoners, Squad 93, police officer Alan Schessel, and myself.
So you started taking him down where? Downtown?
That's correct, sir.
And he was in custody?
Yes, sir, he was.
You advised him of his constitutional rights?
Yes, sir, I did.
You told him about all of his rights?
Yes, sir.
Did you ask him if he wanted to make a statement?
Yes, sir, I did.
And did he make such a statement to you?
Yes, sir.
All right. You also advised him that he had a right not to have an attorney if he wished.
That is correct.
All right, tell us what you said to Mr. Dahmer and what he said to you during the time that you were present with him, where Detective Murphy was not, okay?
Yes, sir. Would you like
me to read from the exhibit if you wish?
Okay, sir. At this time, I rode along with the suspect Jeffrey L. Dahmer in Squad 93 down to the CIB.
Explain what that is, CIB.
It's called it's initials for the Criminal Investigation Bureau. It's the Detective Bureau.
Please.
Once at the CIB, I advised Jeffrey L. Dahmer of his constitutional rights, and he stated that he fully understood them and that he wished to freely make a statement regarding the incident.
Can you tell us what time of the morning, night, or day it was?
This was approximately 1 o'clock in the morning.
Okay, that would have been on the morning of the 23rd or the morning of the 24th?
That would have been on the morning of the 23rd.
Okay, continue on, please.
At this time, Mr. Dahmer states that he is 31 years of age, born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. He states he moved to Richfield, Ohio when he was about 6 years old, and he was raised there and attended and graduated from Revere High School. He states he spent 3 years in the Army after graduation and moved back to Milwaukee when he was approximately 23 years old or so. The subject states he has a father who lives in Pennsylvania and a mother who lives in California. He states he has one brother, 26, living in Cincinnati, and his grandmother on his father's side lives in Milwaukee. The subject states he was raised in the Protestant faith as he was growing up, but he now considers himself to be an atheist.
Let me just stop you there. Is this a question and answer type of thing?
Yes, sir, it is.
And then later you put down whatever notes you thought were important, and then you transcribed them into the form that you're talking about here.
That is correct, sir.
Continue on.
He admitted that he had been arrested in the past and states he is currently on probation for taking Polaroid pictures of a minor. Subject states that when he was 18 years of age and living in Richfield, Ohio, he picked up a hitchhiker whom he described as a white male about 19 years of age. He states he took him home and had homosexual sex with him, and states they were drinking beer and became intoxicated. He states they got into a physical fight because the 19-year-old individual tried to leave, and that during the fight, he states he struck the hitchhiker with a barbell. He states that the blow of the barbell caused the death of the hitchhiker. And at this time, he took the body out into a wooded area by his house and left it there to decompose for about 2 weeks.
Well, let me stop there. Did you know that there had been such a murder or a homicide that had taken place when he was 18 years of age at the time that you were talking to him?
No, sir, I did not.
So he volunteered a commission of a murder.
That's correct, sir.
Is that the first murder that he told you about?
Yes, sir, it is.
And you didn't have him on any other murder charges at that time, did you?
I realized that there was a head in the refrigerator.
I understand that, but
No,
you didn't
sir,
have a murder. You didn't say you're under arrest for the murder of.
No, sir.
Okay, go ahead, continue on, please.
He states he returned with a sledgehammer at this time and used it to break the bones, and then he scattered them about the woods. The subject states he moved to Milwaukee after a 3-year tour in the Army and a 1-year stay in Miami, Florida, where according to the subject, nothing of this nature happened. The subject states he moved in with his grandmother at 2357 South 57th Street when he returned to Milwaukee. And he states that when he was about 25 years of age and living in Milwaukee, he picked up a white male approximately 25 years of age at the 219 Tavern. He states they got a room at the Ambassador Hotel, and they got very drunk and passed out. Subject states when he woke up, the guy was dead and had blood coming from his mouth.
Let me stop you. Did you know of that homicide at the time that he volunteered it?
No, sir, I did not.
Continue on, please.
He states he went to the mall and bought a large suitcase and stuck the dead body into it. He states he called a cab and placed the suitcase into it and went back to 2357 South 57th Street. He states that he took the dead body down his basement near a floor drain and used a knife to cut the flesh off the body and then dismember the body, placed the various parts into plastic bags, and then threw them into the trash. The subject feels this occurred in 1984 during the summer. He indicates that there had been many times that he has had sex with men where no violence was involved, and states that about 2 months after this incident, he met a Hispanic male about 18 years of age, also at the 219 Club at about 1 a.m. They went back to his grandmother's place and had sex, and put sleeping pills in his drink. He states when the guy fell asleep, he strangled him with his hands and took the body down the basement by the drain and used a knife to dismember him and a sledgehammer to break up the bones, and then placed them in plastic bags and threw them into the trash.
Detective Kennedy, did you know of that homicide at the time you were talking to Mr. Dahmer?
No, sir, I did not.
Continue on, please.
He goes on to state about a month later, he met a black and white mixed male, about 20 years of age, at the La Cage, a tavern on National Avenue, and took him back to his grandmother's house where he had sex and used sleeping pills with him. He states when he was asleep, he strangled him and then dismembered his body and disposed of him in the same manner as before.
Did you know of that murder at the time you were talking to Mr. Dahmer?
No, sir, I did not.
Go ahead.
The subject states a year went by and he met a Hispanic male, about 19 years of age, at the 219 Club, and returned with him to his grandmother's house where he again had sex, used sleeping pills, and strangled him, and again dismembered and disposed of the body in the same way.
Once again, you didn't know about that homicide?
No, sir.
Go ahead.
Subject states he moved to 808 North 24th Street and lived there for a year, and was arrested one time for taking pictures of a minor. After 1 year of work release from the House of Correction, he moved back to his grandmother's house and lived there for approximately 6 months. At this time, he moved to 924 North 25th Street, apartment 213. Subject states in the winter of '89, he met a black male about 24 years of age in front of the bookstore on 27th Street and took him to his apartment where he took pictures of him in various sexual poses and had sex with him and put sleeping pills in a coffee and rum drink which he gave to the black male. When the black male fell asleep, he stabbed him with a large hunting knife, which he described as having a 6-inch blade and a black handle. He stabbed him in the neck. After the guy was dead, he put the body in the bathtub and dismembered him. He states he used the knife to dismember him. The subject states he used a plastic trash container or garbage bag and put the bones in it with hydrochloric acid and let them sit for about 3 days until they turned to a mushy substance, and then he flushed them down the toilet. The subject states that he filleted from the body, the subject states the flesh he filleted from the body he put into trash bags and threw them out.
You didn't know of that homicide, did you, at the time you're talking?
No, sir.
Go ahead.
The subject states he also, starting with the third victim, boiled the heads in a cleaning solution and kept the skulls. He kept the skulls in the closet. All identification and jewelry of the victims he states he cut up and threw out into the garbage. The subject states about 2 months later he met a black male about 20 years of age around Wisconsin and Water and walked home with him and again had sex, used sleeping pills, which was placed in a coffee mixture, and strangled him. He then dismembered the body and disposed of him in the same manner as before.
You did not know of that murder?
No, sir.
Go ahead.
Subject states he began getting quicker at cutting up the bodies. The subject states about 1 month later, he met a tall black male about 26 years of age at the C'est La Vie, and they took a taxi home to his apartment, and he repeated the same scenario with him, but did not boil and keep his head. The subject states this was due to time constraints. Subject states about 6 months later, he met a black male about 20 years of age while in Chicago, and rode back to Milwaukee by Greyhound bus. He states before this, he met a Chinese male about 15 years of age at the Grand Avenue Mall. This was around May or early June. He states they took a bus back to his apartment. It was during the day or the afternoon. He states the Chinese male posed for Polaroid photos, and then he gave him sleeping pills in the coffee and rum drink. After he passed out, he strangled him and dismembered and disposed of his body parts in the same way as before.
Once again, these last 2 or 3 murders he's talking about, you had no idea.
That's correct, sir.
Go ahead.
The subject states that the body parts gave off an awful smell in the trash, but no one ever did anything about it, so he just kept following his usual procedure of disposal. Regarding the black male from Chicago, he states that he repeated his usual actions with him. Regarding the head in the refrigerator.
Now, let me stop you there. At the time that you were there, and understanding we're talking primarily about the confession, there was a head found in the refrigerator of his apartment.
That's correct, sir.
It was not identifiable as to whose skull that had been, correct?
Not at that time, sir. no.
Okay, continue talking.
Regarding the head in the refrigerator, he states he met him, a black male about 25 years of age, at 27th in Wisconsin, and took him home and repeated the same actions with him. He states about 1 month ago, he bought a 57-gallon industrial drum and began placing body parts in it. Subject states on about 7/19 of 91, he met a white male about 25 years of age near Marquette University and took him home, had sex with him, gave him sleeping pills in the coffee rum drink, strangled him and filleted him in the bathtub, dismembered him, and placed the body parts in the industrial drum.
Another homicide you did not know about.
That's correct, sir.
Go ahead.
Regarding the Chinese male, the subject states that after giving him sleeping pills, he fell asleep, and he, the subject, went to the bar on 27th Street. He states that as he left the bar, he saw the Chinese guy running down the street naked, and the police saw him and stopped him. And he was not speaking any English, so he talked with police and said that he was a friend of his and that he was staying with him. At this time, he took the Chinese guy back to his apartment, gave him some more coffee and rum solution with the sleeping pills in it, and after he fell asleep again, he strangled him, dismembered him, and disposed of him in the usual way. He then boiled his head. He states it takes about an hour to boil a head. Regarding his last victim, he states that his ID can be found in the bedroom of his apartment.
Was that a fact?
That is correct, sir.
Go ahead.
Regarding 7/23 of 91.
That's the evening or the early morning hours when he was arrested.
Yes, sir. The subject states he met a black male about 25 years of age at the mall on Wisconsin Avenue. He states he offered him $20 in cash to let him take some nude pictures of him. Once at his apartment, they drank rum, and he, the subject, got intoxicated.
When you say the subject, you mean who?
Mr. Dahmer.
Okay.
Subject states that he tried to put handcuffs on the victim, and the victim ran out and got the police. Subject states he is not sure what happened next because he was drunk. Regarding the handcuffs, he would ask his victims if they would allow him to take a bondage picture with the handcuffs on, and that is how he would get them handcuffed. The subject states there is an ID from the male he met on 27th in Wisconsin in his wallet.
Is that a fact? Was that a fact?
Yes, sir, it was.
Go ahead.
The subject states that all his victims knew that homosexual activity was the idea, and possibly pictures. At this time, after the subject gave me this statement verbally, I advised him that I would like to write it down verbatim on paper. However, before I did so, I would like to get another detective to sit in and be witness to this statement. He stated he understood and that he wished to cooperate, and at this time I went and got Detective Dennis Murphy, who entered the room. And together we reiterated his constitutional rights, which he stated he understood and that he wished to waive them in order to help us with this investigation. It was during this time that a 4-page confession was written out by myself, Detective Kennedy, and read back to the subject, who also read it, and then stated that it was accurate and true. And then he signed it, Jeffrey Dahmer. He also initialed each page of the 4-page confession. It should be noted that during this entire time that I spoke with the subject, Jeffrey Dahmer, He was given numerous cigarettes, 4 to 5 cups of coffee, 2 glasses of water, 2 cans of Coca-Cola. He was also allowed to use the bathroom upon request. This entire confession started at approximately 1:30 a.m. and finished at approximately 7:15 a.m. After the confession was completely written out, read over, and signed by the subject, he was asked if there was anything that he would like to do or if he was hungry. He stated that he was not hungry and probably will not be hungry for a long time. However, he would just like to sit and talk about the offenses a little bit more. The conversation which followed at this time has been recorded by Detective Dennis Murphy, and he will file a detailed supplementary regarding what was said during this interview.
Now, you understand now that I understand that you're going to be called back later for additional questioning by either side.
Yes, sir.
But during the time, just so it's clear, he was very cooperative,
Yes, sir, he was.
and he was not intoxicated.
No, sir, he was not.
And he seemed to understand what you were asking him, and you understood his answers.
Yes, sir, he did.
So this was done in a colloquy back and forth, and what you're telling us here is that you put down these words after you talked to him, looking at your notes, and then eventually he signed the papers.
That's correct, sir.
Were these the papers that he signed?
These papers here?
Yes, sir.
No, sir.
Okay, something else that you wrote out.
That is correct, sir.
Is it exactly the same thing, only in handwritten form?
Yes, sir, it is.
So you wrote everything here out in handwritten form, Mr. Dahmer read it, said it was correct, signed it, and then you took all of that same information and typed it up, and that's what you just read.
That's correct, sir.
And we'll see you again, Detective Kent.
Detective Murphy, when we left yesterday, I think we're up to Thursday, July the 25th, 1991. Reference the statement Mr. Dahmer was making to you and your partner, Detective Kennedy.
Yes, sir.
Or would you tell us what happened then on Thursday, the 25th, and at what time, as reflected on your report that would be the start of page 39, please?
39?
I brought you, have you got a 38? Are you at 38?
We were on 38, yes.
Okay, please continue then.
At this time during the interview, Mr. Dahmer went on to state that he realizes that what he has done warrants a death penalty. However, he is not sure that he really wants to die as punishment for his offenses. He stated that when he was younger, he started cutting up animals, and he enjoyed the excitement of cutting it up. And he wished now that he would have just continued to cut up animals and would have stopped with them and not moved on to human beings. He felt that he originally only started it for the curiosity.
Paragraph after the next paragraph reflects his attitudes towards other things. Would you please start telling us what he said reference to that?
Regarding the smaller children.
Yes, sir.
He stated regarding smaller children, Jeffrey stated that although he has been convicted of exposing himself to younger children, and that he has tried to take pictures of minors, he has no sexual desires to be with a younger child. He has never attempted to entice a smaller child for sexual purposes, and he is strictly sexually excited and attracted to young men of any race or ethnic persuasion from the early teens to the late 20s. Also during this interview, the interview that took place on 7/24/91, several photographs were taken from our identification division and were shown to Mr. Dahmer, and he was asked if he has ever met any of these individuals, or in fact, if any of these individuals were his victims. These photographs were picked out specifically because the individual in the photograph was known to still be alive, and it should be noted that each photograph which was shown to him, the individual in the photograph was alive, and we knew where he was. Jeffrey then, upon viewing these photographs, stated, "I've never seen this man before, and he is definitely not one of my victims."
Was that done to test whether or not he was making things up or not?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Because he had identified photographs of the missings, and we wanted to place these photographs in with the missings to see whether or not he was just picking out photographs at random to identify his victims.
So this exercise on your part was to make sure that he was being credible with you on the basis of picking out things that he really thought were true.
That's correct.
Would you continue on? Was that the end of that interview, please?
Yes. There was another interview during that same day.
Please continue on. I take it that, so that we can save some time, all of these interviews were strictly with his cooperation.
Yes.
He initiated a good many of them.
Yes,
He waived the presence of counsel from time to time when he wanted to talk to you folks.
yes, he did.
And what, you would notify his attorneys to at my office, and nonetheless, whether we were there or not, we said go ahead because he wanted to talk, right?
That's correct.
So there was no attempts to stop these conversations from taking place, correct?
That's correct.
And that was clearly made known to Mr. Dahmer, not only by members of the Milwaukee Police Department, but also myself and members of my office in your presence, that he didn't have to do that.
Yes,
He chose to do it.
that's correct.
Okay, so I don't have to ask that all the time. That's a fact, and if there's anything other than that, any kind of interview that was different than that, then let us know, okay?
All right.
All right, would you continue on and tell us what happened next, please?
During the interview, he requested a cigarette and coffee, which he was given. He wished to speak about his feelings regarding the confession that he had made about all of his victims and his apprehension as to the court appearance he was to make later in the afternoon. This time we stated we'd listen to his comments, and he stated that he realizes that there is no way he can change anything in regard to what he did to his victims. He also stated that he realizes it would be impossible to make amends for the crimes and offenses he has committed toward these people. However, he feels that the only way for him to make a new start in his life is to make a clean breast of things and to be fully honest. He states that he feels this is what he did, and he knows it is the only way he can change his life. He states that he knows that this will not change any of the things that he did, but maybe by telling the truth, he can start to make things right and put at ease the minds of his victims' relatives. He also stated that he felt the only way he could start to change himself was to admit exactly what he had done, to state that he is sorry for what he has done, and to swear that he will try to change his life in the future. This time I advised Detective Kennedy that we had to take Mr. Dahmer over for his court appearance. And in a prior conversation with Mr. Dahmer, he expressed apprehension in appearing in court in a paper jumpsuit,
There
which
was
is,
some discussion then about getting him some clothes to
That's
appear
correct.
in court. Was there anything else of substance in that discussion?
no, there wasn't.
Okay, let's go on to the next time that you, he, and others met with Mr. Dahmer, please.
Friday the 26th, I met with Detective John Karabatsis, who's from the Summit County Sheriff's Department in Akron, Ohio, and with Lieutenant Richard Muncie, who's from the Bath County, Ohio Police Department. These two individuals came into Milwaukee to talk to Mr. Dahmer in regards to the homicide that occurred in 1978 that he had confessed to. I'd set up a meeting at 11 a.m. in the Milwaukee County Jail and met with an associate of Mr. Boyle, Attorney Scott Hansen. At 11 a.m. we proceeded to the county jail where we met Mr. Hansen and were met in the library room of the county jail by Mr. Dahmer. I informed Mr. Dahmer of his rights, his Miranda rights, and I asked him if he desired, again, if he wanted to talk to us regarding his homicide investigation. I stated even though his attorney is here, I have to advise him of his rights, and I asked him if he understood them. He stated he did. He had been told them numerous times and he did not wish to invoke his rights. He wanted to waive them and cooperate with us because he wanted to clean everything up. He talked to his attorney for a while. Then I introduced him to Officer Karabatsis and Muncie, informed him where they were from and what they were investigating, and he agreed to cooperate with them. We then showed him aerial photographs of his previous residence in Bath, Ohio. He pointed out the area where he disposed of the bones, which was a heavily wooded area, and he made a diagram indicating the same thing. Do a diagram of the Bath Road where he lived, the driveway, his garage, the house area, small wood area just to the side of the house, indicated an area in the diagram where he disposed of the victim's bones. I then asked him if he recalled the name of Stephen Hicks. He stated that was a name from the victim in Ohio. I asked him how he remembered that. He says, because it was his first one, and you always remember your first one. He says, you don't forget the first one. We then showed him a reproduction photograph of Stephen Hicks, and looking on it, he felt that this was the individual. He was subsequently shown a regular photograph of Stephen Hicks, which depicted the entire body, and he stated, "I'm almost positive that's him. Yeah, that's him. That's the individual I killed in Ohio."
Had he known the name Stephen Hicks at that time? In other words, he was able to recognize the body, but did he know the person's name?
He recalled the name when I mentioned it.
Okay.
You are a detective with the City of Milwaukee Police Department?
Yes, I am.
For what period of time have you been a member of the Milwaukee Police Department?
24 years,
And for what period of time have you been a detective with the Milwaukee Police Department?
13 years.
As such, were you working as a Milwaukee police officer on July the 23rd, 1991?
Yes, I was.
What time did you report to duty on that day?
I was called in at 3 a.m.
And that would have been, as it turned out, a couple hours after Mr. Dahmer was taken into custody.
That's correct.
Do you have occasion that morning to be assigned to do anything relative to Mr. Dahmer as far as official police work was concerned?
Yes, I was informed of a possible multiple homicide and was informed to interview Mr. Dahmer with Detective Kennedy throughout the day and numerous other days.
Now, the Jeffrey Dahmer is the gentleman that I'm pointing to in the middle of the table where I'm standing.
That's correct.
And that's the person you were talking to on multiple occasions.
Yes, it is.
Okay, now, Detective Kennedy has just testified to a confession that he took from Mr. Dahmer prior to your coming into the picture. That has been testified to by him, and then it's alleged that he then went and got you, and then the two of you started working as a team. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Now, how many hours from the time that you first saw Mr. Dahmer until the last time you talked with him did you spend talking to him about his conduct in reference to these homicides?
Approximately 60 hours.
16?
60.
60, yes. You were also present when he was talked to by police representatives of the Bath, Ohio Police Department?
That's correct.
And you were also present when he was talked to by police officers of the West Dallas Police Department?
Yes.
And the reason for that is those crimes, some of these crimes happen, one in Bath, Ohio, and some in West Dallas.
That's correct.
But you were present,
Yes.
so you know what he said relative to those things, to those law enforcement people.
Yes.
During the break with counsel for the state, we went over the confession, and we have extracted the part that is referenced to Milwaukee. We will talk later about what was said as it relates to Bath, Ohio, and as to West Dallas, correct?
Yes.
So anything that we're going to talk about here has been, in effect, the confession you and Detective Murphy took.
Detective Kennedy.
Detective Kennedy, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, Detective Murphy, tell us, when you first saw Jeffrey Dahmer, what was his demeanor?
I was introduced to him by Detective Kennedy. He was sitting in room 411.
Speak up a little bit, I can't hear you.
I was introduced to him by Detective Kennedy. He was sitting in room 411,
That's of the Police Administration
the Criminal
Building?
Investigation Bureau, which is called the CIB.
Is it an interrogation room?
Yes.
Go ahead.
He had a cup of coffee, cigarettes. He was calm, talked in a monotone voice. He appeared alert. He understood what we were talking to him about. He responded to our questions.
He's cooperative?
Cooperative, yes.
Was he abrasive?
No.
Well, how would you describe that part of his demeanor? Was he gentle?
He was quiet.
As far as his, as the concept of his depression, did you see any depression?
No, he reminded me of like someone who got caught doing something wrong, and he was a little bit embarrassed about it, but yet he responded to our questions.
Okay, so he was totally cooperative.
Yes, he was.
Was there ever a time in the 60 hours that you were with him when he wasn't cooperative?
No, there was not.
He was always cooperative.
Yes.
The time that you first met him, that morning on the 23rd day of July 1991, were you aware of any homicides where Jeffrey Dahmer was the suspect in them?
I was informed of what he had told Detective Kennedy prior to my entering the room, but as far as any identification of anyone, I was not.
Okay. Now, he, in the final analysis, told you about his commission of how many homicides in Milwaukee County?
15, well, he mentioned 16 homicides, one of which he did not know whether he killed the individual, and one in Bath, Ohio.
And the one that he didn't know if he killed the individual is the one that's been known as the ambassador.
That's correct.
Now, what I'd like you to do is to tell us, after you started talking to Mr. Dahmer, and I would like you to go through your notes, you typed up your notes in the form of a formal confession, just as Detective Kennedy has just testified about that portion that he took alone, right?
Yes.
All right, do you have that in front of you?
Yes, I do.
All right, that has now been received in evidence as an exhibit number 1, and it's understood that it will only be received in the final analysis after extraneous parts are removed. So, since I have the same thing that you have, if you will tell us, are you going to start on page 14?
Yes.
Okay, would you start reading this confession, and if for any reason you want to take a break, let us know. But we'll go back and forth if we will. So tell us what time it was that you first started talking to Mr. Dahmer, and what, if anything, you said to him and what he said to you.
Well, at 5 a.m. I entered the interview room and was introduced to Mr. Dahmer, at which time I told him I had to advise him of his Miranda rights, and he stated I didn't have to. Pat had already told him.
He told you that?
He told me that. I said, well, I still have to advise you, so I advised him of his Miranda rights.
Tell us what you told him.
I read him from my calendar.
Please read it.
Okay. You have the right to remain silent. I asked him if he understood that. He stated he did. Anything you say can and will be used against you in the court of law. I asked him if he understood that. He stated yes. I continued, you have the right to consult with a lawyer before questioning and to have a lawyer present during questioning. I asked him if he understood that. He stated he did. I continued, if you cannot afford to hire a lawyer, one will be appointed to represent you at public expense before or during any questioning if you so wish. I asked him if he understood that. He stated he did. I continued, if you decide to answer questions now without a lawyer present, you have the right to stop questioning and remain silent at any time you wish, and the right to ask for and have a lawyer at any time you wish, including during the questioning. I asked him if he understood that. He stated yes. Then I continued, do you understand each and every one of these rights that I have just explained to you? And having these rights in mind, do you wish to speak to us? And he stated he did, at which time Detective Kennedy went through the oral confession he had gotten. He transcribed it onto the show-up report, and when we finished the statement, we continued to talk to Mr. Dahmer.
Did Mr. Dahmer sign that which Detective Kennedy had written up and read to
Yes, he
Mr.
did.
Dahmer in your presence, and he signed each page?
Mr. Dahmer signed it, Detective Kennedy signed it, and I signed it.
Okay, and then that was later typed up, and that's what Detective Kennedy read here today.
That's correct.
Okay, now, would you tell us, was he alert, was he awake, did he appear to be tired, anything of that nature?
No, he was alert and awake.
Did he make any requests for coffee, cigarettes, or whatever?
Coffee, cream and sugar, cigarettes, soda,
they were
go to the
made-
bathroom.
They were made available.
Yes,
At no time did he have any complaints at all, correct?
none.
Not even in any of the 60 hours you were with him, correct?
None that I know of.
Now tell us the next thing that you did relative to taking a further statement from Mr. Dahmer with the understanding that things that are not important, such as telephone numbers and places where people work that are insignificant or not relevant, tell us, leave those out and just continue to tell us what he told you.
Okay, we talked to Mr. Dahmer regarding his family. He informed us that his mother and father were divorced. His mother is presently living in Northern California somewhere, and his father is living in Pennsylvania.
Okay?
Informed us where he worked. He stated that he also has a brother in Cincinnati. Jeffrey states that he hadn't seen his parents for quite some time, and he believes the last time he saw his father was in 1979. 79.
Okay.
He also stated that he had a brother in Cincinnati, but he hadn't seen him in a while. We then questioned him regarding the address at the time of the homicides, which occurred in Bath, Ohio, when he was 18 years old. He stated his hometown was Bath, Ohio. And when he was there, he picked up a hitchhiker in Bath, Ohio, across from the fire station, and took him to his house on West Bath Road. He stated they had sex, got into an argument, and he killed the individual by hitting him with a barbell. He stated after this occurred, he cut him up, put him in garbage bags, and threw the bags in the woods behind the house to the west of it. He left him there for about 2 weeks. He stated after 2 weeks, he went to the woods with his sledgehammer, broke up the bones in little pieces, and scattered them about the woods. Stated after this, he joined the Army in 1979. He subsequently was discharged in March of '81. And after he was discharged, he lived in Miami, Florida for approximately 1 year. He moved back to Bath, Ohio for 4 months, and then about June or July of 1982, he moved to his grandmother's house in West Allis on South 57th Street. He stated that from the first homicide through all of this time, he was not involved in any other homicides.
Does that mean that the only homicides he was involved in is the ones he's admitted to?
That meant just the one he admitted to in Bath, Ohio.
Okay.
We questioned him regarding any activities as to why he kept some of the body parts of the victims that were discovered on 25th Street, or whether or not he consumed any body parts. And he stated the only time he ever did consume any body parts was one time, and that was a bicep, at which time he pointed to his right bicep, of a black male that he met on 27th in Wisconsin.
Now, let me just stop you there so I can understand what he meant by saying that he moved from Bath, Ohio in June or July of '82. He moved in with his grandmother, and that from the first homicide through all of this time, he was not involved in any other homicides. You mean the one in Bath, Ohio, and then his first one in Milwaukee that happened at Canvas?
Right.
Okay.
He stated the reason that he consumed the bicep is because it was big and he wanted to try it. He then stated he didn't want to talk about it anymore. He also stated that he would masturbate in front of the body parts and the skulls that he would collect because it brought back memories of the victims. He said he would put these body parts in formaldehyde and he would boil the skulls to get rid of the skin. He had also spray painted several of the skulls. This is reflected in separate reports. He
So
stated,
what you're doing in that is saying that there's another report that goes into that.
yes, several.
Okay, go ahead.
He stated that all the victims he killed, which he believed to be in the vicinity of 15, he did not keep 3 of the skulls. He stated one of the skulls was from the victim in Ohio, and there were 2 others of black males.
That he did not keep.
Correct. He stated he put these 2 skulls in acid and got rid of them that way. He stated the total length of time that this occurred was about 6 years, he believed. He stated the type of pills that he used to put the victims to sleep prior to him strangling them are sleeping pills which he had obtained from a Dr. Hong, H-O-N-G. He stated the reason that he killed these homosexuals, and he stated they all were homosexuals, was because he wanted to be with them. He stated he kept the skulls of the good-looking ones because he didn't want to lose them. He also stated that he felt he could hang on to them if he could in fact kill them and keep their skulls. He stated the last 3 skulls that were in the refrigerator and not boiled belonged to his last 3 victims. This time Mr. Dahmer stated that he was tired, he wanted to get some rest, and he was taken to the city jail.
Now, at this moment, can you tell us what his demeanor was? Was he crying?
No,
Just telling you as a matter of course.
that's right.
Was he shaken?
No.
What was his state of what was it relative to his drinking? Had he appeared to you that he had been drinking?
No, I was informed that he had been drinking when I had come in, that he had drank prior to his arrest, but he appeared to be sober to me.
Okay. Did you have occasion then to talk to him later?
Another statement was taken on the same day, on the 23rd,
What time?
between the time that we finished with the written statement and the time he was taken to the city jail.
Okay, there's a time when he tells you, I'm tired, I want to get some rest.
Right.
And you see that that's taken care of. What time is that at?
I believe that was around 12:15,
Around afternoon hour, you mean?
yes.
So he leaves your presence...
No, excuse me, that was about 10:30.
10:30. So
Right.
he leaves your presence, and where do you have him, in what kind of a holding place?
He was taken up to the city jail, and we informed them of the charges against him and that we wanted a 24-hour guard on him, at which time he was placed in a cell alone away from all prisoners, and they watched him.
This time, did you know the identity of any person he had killed?
After his initial statement, he admitted to 12 homicides, and he stated he had identification of some of the victims in the apartment and on his person, at which time we knew a couple names, but that was about it.
But that's with his assistance you started being able to identify the victims.
That's it, yes, sir.
Okay, now, he leaves you, you take him upstairs, and then there's contact again between you and he and Detective Kennedy. How much longer after he goes upstairs at 10:30?
I believe it was 12:15 or 12:30 he called for us.
Couple hours later?
12:45, yes,
Couple hours later?
correct.
He calls for you. Tell us how that happened.
Well, we had informed him, he stated he wanted to cooperate, and we said, if you recall anything that we have not discussed, all you have to do is give us a call. If you want to talk about it, we'll be glad to talk to you. He was taken to the cell. We went about doing our work and doing our reports, at which time we received a call from the jail indicating that he wished to speak to us.
And you took advantage of that request and you went upstairs to talk to him.
That's correct.
Well, what happened then? Tell us where that conversation took place and what happened as a result of that.
We went up to the jail, we took him from the jail, took him back down to the Criminal Investigation Bureau in the same room, 411, and we interviewed him regarding the information that he had for us. His interview began approximately 1:15 p.m.
Did you ask him whether or not he had gotten any rest?
Yes.
What did he tell you?
Said that he couldn't sleep.
And his demeanor was pretty much the same as you had described it before?
Yes.
And you gave him whatever he asked for?
Coffee, cigarettes.
Okay. So tell us about that statement now. By the way, Mr. McCann in his opening statement does not name the kind of drug. If the name of the drug is mentioned, I ask that you don't mention the name.
Okay.
Okay? Please continue.
We, again, advised Mr. Dahmer of his Miranda rights,
Same rights.
same rights,
He wanted to talk.
and we told him that he did not have to speak to us, and he stated he understood these rights, and he stated, I've told you everything already. I have nothing to hide, so I might as well tell you about the ones I forgot. Then he went on to tell us about other victims.
Tell us what was said.
He stated there was one more Hispanic male that he met in Chicago about 2 weeks ago, just after the 4th of July. He stated this Hispanic male was about 25 years old, and he met him at Carol's, which is a gay bar on Wells Street in Chicago, Illinois. He stated he and this Hispanic male then took a Greyhound bus back to Milwaukee, and the Hispanic male stayed for 2 days in his apartment. He stated he does not recall his name. He thought it might be Tony, but he is not sure. He stated after the first day, they had oral sex with each other and got along together. On the second day, the Hispanic male stated he was going to be leaving, at which time the defendant stated he did not want him to leave, so he gave him sleeping pills and coffee in order to keep him there. He stated after he passed out, he then strangled the Hispanic male and dismembered him and put his head in the refrigerator. He stated he did not boil the head, and when he would boil heads, he would use Soilex to boil the heads. He stated he also purchased a 57-gallon drum in which he put the torsos of 3 of his victims.
Was that drum found in his apartment?
Yes, there was.
And there were remains, human remains in it?
Yes, there were.
Were they identifiable human remains?
Yes, there were.
Go ahead.
He stated he even spray painted some of the skulls with spray paint so they looked artificial. Mr. Dahmer stated he purchased a spray paint from an art shop on Water Street.
Did he tell you why he did that?
Just to make them look artificial so no one would realize they were the real skulls.
Did you make note of that as his reason for doing that?
That's in another statement.
Okay. Continue on, please.
I then questioned him regarding the torsos in the 57-gallon tank, And he stated one is that of the Hispanic male from Carroll's Bar, one was from the black male on 27th Street, and the third one was from the black male he met at the bus station in Chicago. I informed him that there was a skeleton recovered in his apartment, and he stated that was from the black male he met in front of the bookstore approximately 1 year ago. Mr. Dahmer further stated that he would cut off the penis and body parts, put them in formaldehyde to preserve them, and then look at them and masturbate for gratification. He further stated that he had experimented with ether to put people asleep, but it didn't work
Why did he tell you he experimented with ether?
because sometimes he wouldn't have sleeping pills, so he'd try ether, and that it was cheaper, but it didn't work.
Okay, continue on.
Regarding the other 6 torsos that apparently are missing and cannot be accounted for the amount of heads that had been discovered in the apartment, he stated that these torsos were placed in acid and were eaten away and then flushed down the toilet when they became slushy. Mr. Dahmer then stated he remembers another victim, and this homicide occurred about 5 months ago, and it was a black male about 20 years old who he met on 27th in Wisconsin. He stated he got this individual to pose for him, gave him a drink, and then cut off his skin. He eventually put the skin in acid. He stated he skinned the entire body, then boiled the head of this individual, and subsequently disposed of the body in plastic bags after dismembering it. He stated that when he would strangle this victim, he would use his hands, and about 4 times he used a black leather-type strap. He had bought this strap for this specific purpose.
Did you then go into a different subject matter with him?
Yes.
What about?
Regarding his activities upon joining the Army,
Go ahead.
he stated he joined the Army in 1979 and was discharged in March of '81. He was stationed in Wallwell, Germany. He stated that after he went to Florida for a year, returned to Bath, Ohio in March of '82, stayed for 4 months, and then returned to the residence of his grandmother on South 57th Street. He originally stated that the killings started in '84 again, but to the best of his recollections, he believes these killings started in '87.
So he's telling you that after having time to think about it, his better recollection was they started in '87 and not in '84.
That's correct.
Okay.
Mr. Dahmer stated that this was all he could remember at this time, and if he does recall any further information, he'll contact either myself or Detective Kennedy. He states that these are the only homicides he can recall that he was involved in at this time.
So he said in closing that he would contact you people.
Yes,
You didn't ask him to do that, he volunteered to do it.
yes.
Go ahead.
While questioning Mr. Dahmer regarding the sledgehammer he used to break up the bones of his victims while he was living at his grandmother's house, he stated that it was kept in the garage and it had a gray handle. I subsequently informed another Detective Farmer who was at the grandmother's house to check for this sledgehammer. He did recover it. He returned it to the Criminal Investigation Bureau where it was shown to Mr. Dahmer, and upon viewing it, he stated that that was the one he used on his victims on South 57th Street.
Did that end that period of questioning?
No, there was another report taken,
Another what?
another statement taken from Mr. Dahmer during this time also.
Okay, at what time was that? During the same time that you're talking about now at the 12:45 session?
Yes.
Okay, tell us about that.
After we escorted Mr. Dahmer down to the interview room and during the investigation, he stated, and after he told us he wanted to talk to us about the 2 additional homicides that he forgot to mention originally. After telling us about these homicides, we questioned him regarding the substance that was sprayed on some of the skulls that we found in his apartment, because the medical examiner had informed us that there appeared to be a spray paint substance on 3 skulls. Mr. Dahmer stated that he had gone to the Pallet Shop, which is an art store located on South Water Street. He stated that at the store he purchased some enamel spray paint, type of coloring being a fake granite. He was asked why he used the spray paint on the skulls, and he stated he sprayed them in order to give them an artificial look in case someone would see them, they would feel they were not real. Upon asking him which skulls he sprayed, he stated the black male, which he met on 27th Street, was one of the skulls. The mixed mulatto, which he met at the Lacage on West National, was the second skull sprayed, and the black male prostitute, which he picked up in front of 219 South 2nd Street, was the third skull sprayed. This time we questioned Mr. Dahmer regarding numerous boxes of Soilex, which is a cleaning powder that was found in his apartment, and he stated that he used the Soilex along with a water solution to boil the heads, which he had decapitated from his victims. He stated the Soilex effectively boiled off the skin and hair from the skulls in about 1 hour. He also stated that one of the torsos that he had taken from the victim, he had also boiled in a large kettle, which he kept and boiled it in Soilex. This time he was questioned regarding the homicide of a...
Well,
Okay.
the next part has to do with a matter that is not relevant to these proceedings.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, is that pretty much the sum and substance of the second interview?
No, he was asked one more question regarding...
Please tell us.
He was asked his question regarding the numerous types of ether that were found in his apartment, and he stated he bought the ether in an attempt to use it on some of the victims after he had drugged them, in an attempt to keep them in a sleep-like state longer. However, he stated the ether did not work very well and it only made them slightly intoxicated or high, so he didn't use it.
Now, did you then let him go back into his cell?
That's correct, he was returned to his cell.
And that was still...
If we're in between statements.
I beg your pardon, Your Honor?
If we're in between statements, we've been going for not quite an hour and a half.
Good.
so I
It'd be a nice
think
day.
we'll really take a recess.
Fine.
About 15 minutes in duration. Court's in recess. All right, please. Be seated, please. Mr. Boyle, you may continue.
I believe that we have concluded talking about any statements that were made on the day of his arrest, the 23rd.
That's correct.
Did you have contact with him on the next day?
Yes, I did.
And how did that contact come along?
At approximately 8:30, we received a call from the jail that Mr. Dahmer requested to speak with us again.
8:30 in the morning.
8:30 a.m., yes.
So in other words, he was out of your presence in the afternoon of the 23rd, and the next time he heard that he wanted to talk to you was the next morning at 8:30.
That's correct.
You did not try and initiate, or anyone else in your department, any conversations with him in the interim, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so tell us what happened.
After we received the information that he wanted to speak with us, we again went up, removed him from the cell, brought him down to the CIB, and this time we went to 407. Where he was again advised that he didn't have to speak to us, advised of his rights. He stated he understood those, and we questioned him regarding his early life in Ohio.
Who brought that up, you or him?
It was brought up during the discussion by either ourselves or him. We wanted to get some more background information, so we brought it up.
Tell us what he said.
He remembered his early family life as being one of extreme tension. States the tension came from the relationship that existed between his mother and his father. He said he was not physically abused or sexually abused, and he did not witness any physical abuse from his parents. He stated that they were constantly at each other's throat and arguing. He stated his mother appeared to have some psychiatric problems and, in fact, had suffered a nervous breakdown at one time during his early childhood. He stated that she was on medication, had been seeing a doctor for much of the time. He states that he was advised by relatives that his mother had suffered a postpartum depression after he was born. And he took that to indicate that he was at least partially the problem for his parents' bad marital status. He stated he believed his mother became depressed after his birth and never quite fully recovered, and therefore he felt a certain amount of guilt in regards to the bad marriage of his parents.
Now, this is information that generally you might want to know about somebody, especially somebody who's committed these kinds of crimes, correct?
That's correct.
So it wasn't something he was volunteering to make excuses, was it?
No, we requested this.
Fine, continue.
He stated that when he was 18 years old, and the divorce occurred between his mother and father. This time his mother moved to Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin, and his father had been on court order to stay out of the house, and he had moved into a motel several miles from his house.
His father had?
Yes.
Okay.
Said that at the time his mother took his younger brother, who was approximately 6 years younger than him, and she moved out and left him alone in the house. said at this time, he started having strong feelings about being left all alone. And it was at this time he remembered having strong desires for not wanting to have people leave him. He stated that at this time he began hating to sleep alone at night. He further indicates that it was about this time in his life that he became familiar with alcohol, and he immediately became a heavy drinker and abused alcohol on a regular basis. He then went into the Army, and he indicates that the alcohol intake increased, and he was actually released 6 months early from the Army because of the alcohol abuse. He states while in the Army he was a field medic. He then stated that he began having fantasies of killing people at an early age, about 17 or 18. States although these fantasies were fleeting, he feels that he had the fantasies to overcome the feelings that he had frustration and emptiness which he felt were in his life. He states after he moved to Milwaukee in '81, the fantasies of killing people began to excite him and become more frequent. Regarding his victims, he stated he received physical pleasure from being with the victims when they were alive, and he would have preferred that the victims remained alive. However, he states that it was better to have them dead than to have them leave. He states that when he felt they were to leave, that is when he would decide to kill them. Regarding the fact that he stated that he had in fact eaten parts of one of the victims, he states that he feels that by eating parts of the victims, it was his way of keeping them with him even longer and making the victims a part of him.
Okay, now that pretty much concluded that interview.
Well, there was other reports, other interviews at the same time.
Okay, but let me just stop at that time. This was normal police practice where you and your partner sit down and you raise certain subject matters, he answers the questions, correct?
That's correct.
He wasn't volunteering this where you were just writing down, he was responding to your questions.
Right, we would ask questions.
Okay, and so you kind of developed the area of inquiry rather than him volunteering the inquiry.
That's correct.
Now, did he ever tell you that he had heard voices or that he was hallucinating or the devil made him do it? Did he ever go into that with you?
No.
Never laid the blame on anyone, did he?
No.
Okay, go ahead and tell us the next time and the circumstances of you talking to Mr. Dahmer.
We asked Mr. Dahmer additional questions regarding the first homicide that occurred in Bath, Ohio. And he stated that, and prior to that, he had just started drinking when he was 17. He stated that his friends were straight that he knew of, and they all smoked marijuana in high school. He states he did not know any friends that were gay, but he himself had homosexual tendencies and had never gone out with a girl or had sex with any females. He states his first homicide occurred around October of '78 when he saw a white male hitchhiker whom he describes as 18, 5'10", tall, skinny build, maybe 150 pounds, having straight brown collar-length hair, not wearing glasses, clean shaven, and he believed he was not a homosexual. He stated he didn't have sex with this individual, he just invited him in for a drink. And when the individual wanted to leave, that's when he hit him with the barbell and subsequently disposed of the body behind the residence. He stated he did burn his clothes and identification at that time.
Did he tell you who the man was? Did he know his name?
Not at that time, no.
Okay. I mean, at the time he was talking to you, did you ask him if he knew who it was?
Yes,
What did he say?
didn't know. He just
Go ahead.
gave us his physical description.
Okay, go ahead.
He again went through the various places that he lived after joining the Army and being discharged in March of 1981, where he was a field medic. He stated he had moved to Miami and left in about October of '81, went back to Bath, Ohio, lived there until December of '81 or January of '82, where he moved to Milwaukee with his grandmother in December of '81 or January of '82, and stayed there until '88 when he moved to 808 North 24th Street. He remained there for 6 months to a year and then moved to his present address at 924 North 25th Street. He again states that there were no homicides from the '78 homicide until the one that occurred at the Ambassador Hotel, at which time he thought it was 1984. He stated that he died at the hotel, and he then took him to his grandmother's residence where he dismembered the body and disposed of the parts.
Now, and sometime earlier, he had told you and your partner that the first murder after the one in Bath, Ohio, was in '84, and then he changed to '87. Is he now back to '84 again?
Well, he wasn't, yeah, the 87 came out later on in the interviews.
Okay, so '84, as it said here, had been subsequently corrected to be '87.
That's correct.
Now, did he tell you that he knew who the man was that he killed in the Ambassador Hotel?
No, he did not recall.
As to, well, okay, so he didn't know that man's name.
Right.
Okay, continue on.
He went on to relate that there were 3 more homicides at his grandmother's residence, and the rest were at his address at 924 North 25th Street. He states the reason there were no homicides from 78 to 84 at that time was because he was too busy in what he was doing.
Now, that date should really be, based
87.
upon what you learned, it would have been 78 to 87.
That's correct.
Okay, go ahead. Because he was too busy with what he was doing. Go ahead.
Right. He was in the Army, and after work, he'd go out drinking with the guys. Then he'd come back, go to bed, get up and go to work. He states that this continued through the Army, so he didn't have any time. Then he went to Florida. He was too busy. He was working. Then he arrived in Milwaukee. He was too busy until he discovered the gay bars. He states he did not have any homosexual relationships while in the Army or in Florida. His first experience started after he arrived in Milwaukee and going to the gay bars. He states he would not maintain a relationship with the individuals whom he had sex with, and most of them are one-night stands. He stated he enjoyed the company of these individuals, but did not like to see them go. Stated that after the murder started, that being with these other homosexuals gave him pleasure, and he preferred them alive. But if they wanted to leave and he couldn't have them alive, he would have them dead, and that's why he would dismember them and save either their skulls or other body parts. States that the victim, whose right bicep he had eaten, was one that he had cared for, and the individual had big biceps. He stated that he put Crisco on the bicep, softened it up with a meat tenderizer, and then fried it in a skillet. He stated he also saved this individual's heart in the freezer and a portion of an arm from a black male that he had met at a bookstore about 1 year ago. He states he didn't intend to consume these parts.
Those parts were in the freezer in his apartment at the time he was arrested, correct?
Yes.
Go on, please.
He also states that he had killed the individuals. He had oral and anal sex with the victims after death, but not all of them. He states that when he was in high school, he had fantasized about killing someone, but it did not take effect until 1978, the first time, and then later in, well, it says 1984, which was 1987. We asked him why he just didn't have oral and anal sex with the individuals while they were alive and let them go, and he stated he didn't want to lose them, and that the death and dismemberment led to excitement and gratification. We then asked him if he had ever talked to a psychiatrist, and he stated he talked to a Dr. Crowley, who works for the social services a couple times, possibly 2 or 3 times in the past month. And he states that Dr. Crowley had prescribed medication for him, but he states he didn't get any because he felt he didn't need it. He also states that he was fired from his job on July 7th, 1991, and he had known a week prior that he was going to be fired. And he feels this is the reason why the killings escalated, because he was alone at night and did not want to be alone. He had no company. He felt that these individuals would keep him company. We then asked Mr. Dahmer if he'd be willing to view photos, namely Polaroids, that were recovered in his apartment that he had taken of the victims to help us identify these victims and to help us place them in the correct order of which he had murdered these victims, and he agreed to do this. This time, Attorney Wendy Patricus arrived with a doctor and our interview ceased.
Now, you asked Mr. Dahmer to view photos. The photos that you asked him to review were photos of dead people, were they not?
All but, well, there were some other photographs.
I understand, but there was a bunch of photos taken in his apartment.
Yes.
They were Polaroids.
Yes,
It was clear that the pictures of some of those fellas on the pictures they were in a dead state.
that's correct.
You wanted to have him assist you in helping to identify the people.
Yes,
You didn't know who the people were,
no,
and he wanted to do that.
yes,
As a matter of fact, when he was told that there was an attorney in the picture, he didn't even want an attorney, did he?
that's correct.
He wanted to talk and continue to assist law enforcement in the identification of the persons.
Yes,
By the time an attorney came into the case, he had already confessed to these multiple murders, but the identifications weren't known, correct?
that's correct.
So he wanted to continue to do that, and that was his right, and he did that
Yes,
at all times.
yes.
Okay, and then when do we have the next piece of activity with Mr. Dahmer?
On Wednesday, the 24th, we continued to question him after he had seen the attorney in room 407. We'd given him cigarettes, coffee, soda. And we went through the Polaroids to try to establish an order of the homicides in the way in which they actually occurred. Mr. Dahmer agreed to cooperate with us, and we started with the first homicide that occurred in Milwaukee.
Let me just interrupt as I'm reading what you're saying. Mr. Dahmer said he would be glad to cooperate with us in any way.
That's correct.
And I just stress that because that's a fact, is it not?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Say the first homicide that committed in Milwaukee, it occurred in either November of '84 or November of '85, to the best of his recollection. We subsequently found out that it was November of 1987.
Okay,
He stated he met this victim and they went to the Ambassador Hotel. Again, he described this individual as a white male, 25. Time he stated he was 5'6", 130 pounds, slim build, blonde hair, shoulder length and straight, maybe parted in the middle, and clean shaven. He stated he was fair complected and had a smooth skin and possibly wearing jeans. He indicated that they went to the hotel with the individual. They were drinking. He gave him a drink which contained the sleeping pills. He then awoke and the subject was dead next to him and blood was coming from his mouth. He stated he then put the subject in a suitcase, took a cab to his grandmother's house on South 57th Street, where he drained the blood, cut the body up, and used a sledgehammer to break the bones. He stated that he then disposed of the body in plastic bags. He then continued, he indicated that in January of '85 or '86, which was actually January of '88, he met victim number 2 in front of the 219 Club on South 2nd Street. He stated that the victim was waiting for a bus which was heading towards the south side. He described this individual as a Hispanic male, 16 to 18, 6 foot, 150 pounds, slim build, having dark, straight, short hair, clean shaven, and possibly wearing a t-shirt and tennis shoes. He stated that when he met this individual and all the victims, he would approach them and ask them if they would like to make some money for posing for him in the nude, viewing videos, and coming for a drink at his residence. He would offer various amounts of money to these individuals and stated that each individual accepted his offer and would go with him to his residence. He indicated that the second victim went to his grandmother's house on South 57th Street with him by taking a bus. He stated that he subsequently had sex, then gave this individual the sleeping potion, killed him by strangulation, and smashed the bones with a sledgehammer and disposed of the bones. He stated he did not keep anything from this individual, nor had he kept anything from the first victim. Continue, the third victim he met about 2 months later, approximately March of '85 or '86, which again would be March of '88. He stated that he met another Hispanic male in the Phoenix Bar, which is also located in the 200 block of South 2nd Street, near the 219 Club. He related that this individual was a Hispanic male, 19 to 21, 5'8", 130 pounds, slim build, light brown complexion, having straight, short black hair, clean shaven, and having smooth skin. Stated he is wearing a long, knee-length, brownish vinyl coat. Stated he asked this individual to come to his residence to look at videos and to take photos or engage in sex. He stated that this victim did accompany him to his grandmother's house, where he had oral sex on him. He then proceeded to drug this individual so he slept. He subsequently killed him, dismembered the body, and disposed of it. He related that he did not keep any parts from this victim either. The fourth victim, whom he stated he met sometime in 1987, but he is not sure because it could have been his grandmother's house when he was there a second time in 1989. He was not sure of his dates, but he stated he did meet this individual at the La Cage, which is on 2nd and National, and he met him at closing time. Upon viewing the photo of Anthony Sears, he stated that this is the individual that he believes he met at the La Cage.
Is this the first person that he's able to identify?
Yes.
And that is victim number what?
Victim number 4 in Milwaukee.
Thank you.
He described this victim as a black male, 21 to 22, 5 feet 9, 150 pounds, slim to medium build, light complexion, having short curly hair and a small ponytail in back, which had a rubber band around it. He stated that he was wearing jeans at the time. He stated he met this individual that he identified as Anthony Sears through the photo, and he got one of Mr. Sears' friends to drive him and Mr. Sears in the friend's auto to his grandmother's house. He described the auto as being a large, beat-up, older model, dark blue auto. He indicated that after arriving at the residence, he used the same ploy to get the individual to come with him. He related that when they got there, they engaged in sex. He gave him the drink that put him to sleep and subsequently killed him and dismembered the body. He indicated that this was the first one where he had kept anything of the individuals. He stated that he kept the victim's skull, which he boiled to remove all the skin, and he kept the scalp with the small ponytail because he liked it. He stated he kept the genitals of this person. He stated that at the time of his arrest, these items were in the black metal cabinet. He also stated that to preserve the skull and genitals, he had called the hardware store and asked what would dry out a rabbit skin, and they recommended acetone, which he used to dry out the scalp and genital area. He stated the reason he kept the scalp was because he liked it. He also stated that the skull he painted.
He kept those remains through the entire period of time, and they were recovered.
Yes.
Go ahead, please.
The fifth victim, which was 2 months after he moved into his apartment at 924 North 25th Street, he figures was in 1990. He stated that this individual was the first one that he took photos of. We showed him a photo album which contained 15 photos of a black male in various positions, and he identified this individual as the person he met at the 219 Club area and offered him the same line as to come to be photographed, to have a drink and look at dirty videos.
The 15 photos that you're talking about, were they photos of a live or dead person?
They were photos of a dead person.
In various poses?
Yes.
Go ahead.
He indicated that this victim agreed, and he took him to 924 North 25th Street, apartment 213, where he drugged him, subsequently killed him by strangulation, and after removing his clothes, he saw the tattoo of Cash D, the initial D, on his chest and pitchforks going up in the name of Cash. The photographs in the album also depicted this openly. He described this individual as a black male, 22, 5'8" to 5'9", 140 pounds, curly black hair with a slight mustache, and the photos also depicted this. He stated that after Cash D had died, he had oral sex on him.
Did you know the identity of who that gentleman was at the time?
At that time, no, he did not.
Continue on, please.
He states that he did keep this individual's skull and painted it and dried it out. The next individual was the sixth victim in Milwaukee. He stated he met him at the Phoenix Bar on 2nd Street. He again approached this individual with the same line as to having to pose for photos and having to view videos and have a drink. He described this individual as a black male, about 24, 6 feet 2, 170 pounds, medium build, dark skin, prematurely bald, with very close cut hair, clean shaven, and he said he used to be with the Milwaukee Ballet. He states that he had oral sex with this individual and then killed him by the same procedure, drugging him until he slept, strangling him, and dismembering him. He states he did not keep anything from this individual. Upon viewing a photograph of a missing person, he identified victim number 6 as being Edward Warren Smith. He states that the photo did not look like the individual he picked up, and states that he stated that the photo did look like the individual he picked up, but he did not keep any of his body parts.
After looking at the photo of Mr. Smith, the one that you showed him, the missing person, he identified him, but he didn't know his name, did he?
No, he did not.
Continue on, please.
He then continued on with victim 7, who he stated he met in front of the bookstore in the 800 block of North 27th Street. He stated this occurred in the summer of 1990, and he described this individual as a black male, 24, 6 foot, 160 pounds, medium build, medium complexion, having chin whiskers, short black hair, and he states he approached this individual with the same line. He had sex with him and then drugged him and killed him by cutting his throat. He states that after taking photos of this individual, he dismembered him, disposed of his body parts except for his bicep, which he kept in the freezer, and his skull, which he painted after the skin had been removed and it had dried. He also kept the entire skeleton and bleached it out. The next victim, victim number 8, he met at 2nd and Wisconsin by the bank about 2 months after victim number 7. States that this individual was a black male, about 5'9", 150 pounds, slim build, medium to dark complexion, having short black hair. He states that they had walked to his residence up Wisconsin Avenue, and he approached him with the same line as he did the others. When he got to his apartment, they drank, they talked, but didn't have any sex because he wasn't his type. He states that he killed him because he had already given this individual the potion, and after doing that, he did not want to have sex with him, and he thought this individual would wake up and be pissed off at him, so he killed him. States he did not keep anything from this individual after dismemberment because he wasn't his type. He continues that he met the 9th victim in February of 1991, and the subject was waiting for a bus by Marquette. States this occurred about 4 months after meeting victim 8. Describes this individual as a black male, 18, 6 foot, 140 pounds, slim build, medium complexion, with a 3-inch perm and a thin mustache. States he approached him with the same offer, and when the guy agreed to accompany him to his apartment, he subsequently gave him the drinking potion, had oral sex, and then killed him by strangulation. He stated that he used a strap to strangle him this time, and that the subject was wearing an earring. He states he kept the skull of this individual, the hands, and the genitals. Upon viewing a family photograph which had been submitted by one of the relatives, this individual was identified as Curtis Strader.
Mr. Dahmer identified that gentleman.
Yes.
Go ahead.
He continued on that he met the 10th victim in March of 1991 on the corner of 27th and Kilbourne. Described him as a black male, 25, 5 feet 9 to 10 inches, 150 pounds, short black hair, medium build, and medium complexion. He stated he went through the same procedure in meeting these individuals and the same offers, and upon getting them to his residence, subsequently gave them the potion where they drank it. He strangled them and had oral sex on this victim after death. Mr. Dahmer viewed a BFI photo and subsequently identified this individual as Earl Lindsay. He states he believes this was the same individual who was his 10th victim. He stated that he saved this individual's skull. Continued on that he met victim number 11 in front of the 219 bar on 2nd Street around May of 1991. This individual, he stated, was deaf and dumb. States that individual's friends drove him to 23rd and Wells, and that they were a white female and a heavyset white male, and they were also deaf mutes. He stated that he communicated with this individual by writing, and he felt this individual could read lips partially. He states he offered this individual $50 to come over to take photos and view videos, but he did not know if he had sex. He states he gave this individual the drinking potion, he passed out, and when he woke up, this individual was dead. He states he continued through the same procedure as to drain the body of blood, dismember it, and dispose of it, and he kept this individual's skull. He then viewed a Wisconsin driver's license with the photo of Tony A. Hughes, described as 6 foot, 150 pounds. And upon viewing this photo, he states that this is the deaf mute that he had met at the bar and took to his house and subsequently killed. Mr. Hughes' ID was found in the victim's apartment. In the suspect's apartment. He stated he went on and met victim 12 in late May in front of the Grand Avenue Mall. He states he went through the same procedure of offering money to have photos taken. And he describes this individual as an Oriental male, about 14, but whom he thought was at first 17 or 18. He describes him as 5 feet 5, 120 pounds, slim build, having dark hair. He states that he and this male took the bus back to his residence, and the individual posed for 2 photographs while he was alive. He then gave him the drink mixture which contained the sleeping potion. He states they were watching videos and this individual passed out. He states he then had oral sex with him and then went to the bar to get some beer because he ran out. He states while he was walking back from the bar, which was located on 27th Street just north of Kilbourne, he saw the Oriental male staggering down the street. He states he went up to him and the police stopped him. He states he then told the police that he was a friend of this individual and that he had gotten drunk and done this before. The police escorted him back to his apartment, and he stated he would take care of him because he was his friend. He states he then went into the apartment and subsequently killed this individual in the same way as he killed the others by strangulation, and after this he had oral sex on the victim. He states he then took more photographs and dismembered the body, keeping the skull. He also states that he had anal sex with this victim after death. After viewing the photographs of the victim that he took, he said this is the same individual that had run down the street and was stopped by the police. A check of our records revealed that this individual was a Conorak Simpson phone, and he had been missing since May 26, 1991. Mr. Dahmer stated that he kept this victim's skull also.
Let me just interrupt for a moment. In regard to this one that you're just talking about, earlier Detective Kennedy told us about a Chinese person. Is that the same?
Yes.
Okay, and it was Mr. Dahmer's statement to you that the person he thought to be 17 or 18.
Yes.
Continue on.
The next victim he met at the Chicago bus station after the gay pride parade on June 30th in Chicago. He described this individual as a black male, 22, 5'8", 140 pounds, medium build, dark complected, having a high top with a fade cut on the left side. It's a hairstyle. He states he met this individual and went through the same procedure to offer him money to pose nude and view videos. He states this individual and himself took the Greyhound back to the city and then took a city vet cab to his residence. He states he usually uses city vet cabs. He stated they were playing with each other, but they had no sex. He states he gave him the drink and then he subsequently passed out. He then used the strap to kill him. He states he did not have sex with this individual, but he did dismember him, keep his head, and put it in the freezer. He said the body was put in the 57-gallon barrel that was in his residence. A fingerprint was obtained from this individual and was subsequently identified as possibly being a Donald Montrell. Individual was from Chicago, and a photo was sent from the Chicago Police Department to Milwaukee, which depicted the picture of this individual photographed on May 3rd of 1990. This photo was shown to Mr. Dahmer, and he stated it looks like the guy, but he could not be sure. The photo was old. On comparing this photo with the photograph taken by Mr. Dahmer of Mr. Montrell, after Mr. Montrell was dead, they appeared similar, and Mr. Montrell was subsequently identified as the 13th victim. We then continued with the photographs that Mr. Dahmer had taken and the 14th victim. He stated he met him in Chicago at Carol's Gay Bar after the 4th of July, possibly on the 5th or 6th. Stacy stayed at the bar until about 4:30 a.m. and then left with this individual, and he offered him the same deal to come to Milwaukee, view videos, and to pose for him. They took the Greyhound bus back from Chicago and then took a cab to his residence. He describes this individual as a Puerto Rican male, 23 to 24, 5'10", 140 pounds, light to medium complected, having short black hair and a thin mustache. He stated this individual was half Puerto Rican and half Jewish. He stated that this individual stayed for 2 days. They had oral sex together on the first day. He states that on the second day, the individual wanted to leave, at which time he decided he did not want him to leave. So he gave him the drink with the sleeping potion, and when he fell asleep, he states he killed him the same way he did the others, took the photos of him, dismembered him, took more photos, and then kept his head in the freezer. We obtained the name from a missing report from Chicago and a photo that was brought to Milwaukee. And upon viewing this photo, Mr. Dahmer identified this individual, and he was identified as Jeremiah Weinberger. Mr. Dahmer stated that after he had killed him, he put his head in the freezer and put his body in the 57-gallon drum that was in his apartment. He then went on to victim number 15, who he states he met on 27th between State and Kilbourne, a week prior to being caught. He states this was his second to last victim. He identified this individual as a black male, 24, 5'7", 170 pounds, having short hair, muscular build, and he stated that his ID he carried in his wallet. The check revealed that the individual had been identified as Oliver Lacey and showed his photograph. We showed the photograph to the suspect, and he stated that this in fact is the individual who was his 15th victim and the second last to die. He stated he met him on 27th Street. He asked him where he was going, and the individual stated he was going to his cousin's house. He then went through the same procedure as to invite him over to his residence to pose for photos He stated that this guy was a bodybuilder and a model, and he had agreed to come over with him. He stated he was wearing a white shirt, blue jeans, and some type of leather shoes. States when they arrived at his residence, they removed all their clothes and were doing body rubs. He gave him the drink. The individual fell asleep, at which time he proceeded to strangle him, killing him, and then having anal sex after death. He states he put this individual's head in the bottom of the refrigerator in a box, and he kept his heart in the freezer to eat later. He states he did keep his right bicep, which he subsequently fried on the skillet, and ate part of it. He stated it tasted like beef. He stated the reason he kept this individual's identification was because he wanted more pictures than he had taken of him in the various positions that he had placed him in. Continued on to victim 16, who he stated was his last victim. This subject was identified through an ID card that he had left in Mr. Dahmer's apartment. This individual was identified as Joseph Breedhoff. Mr. Dahmer stated he met him on Wisconsin Avenue near Marquette University, and this individual was waiting for a bus, and he had a six-pack in his arms. He stated he got off the bus, approached him with the same offer as he did with the others, and he agreed to go with him to his apartment. They went to his residence, where he had oral sex on this individual before killing him. States he gave him the potion, and when the individual went to sleep, he strangled him with the strap. He subsequently put his head in the freezer and his body in the 57-gallon barrel in his residence. He went on to state that these are the only homicides that he has committed, and that the only other one that we know about is the one in 1978, which was the one in Bath, Ohio. Mr. Dahmer went on to state he was still willing to cooperate with us, and if we have any more photos of people that are missing, and that we may have identification of them, he will be glad to view these photos to try to make identification of the other unknown victims. As of this time, we had 10 tentative identifications, with some being positive, and possibly 11th who was victim number 5 with the tattoo of Cash D.
You're still on the 24th of July,
That's correct.
and that was how long of a session?
It was quite a long time.
Cooperative still?
Yes,
Demeanor the same?
yes,
Any crying?
none,
Any hysterics?
none,
It's just a matter of fact.
yes.
Continue on, tell us what happened.
While interviewing Mr. Dahmer, we spoke to him whether or not, in regards to the fact that he had knowledge of whether or not these acts that he was committing were right or wrong. At this time, Mr. Dahmer stated he was fully aware that the acts he was committing were wrong, and that he feels horrified that he was able to carry out such an offense. He stated that it was obvious he realized that they were wrong because he went to great time and expense to try to cover up his crimes. He stated that he used quite a bit of caution by setting up alarm systems in his apartment, that being on the outer door, the sliding door leading to his hallway, bedroom, and bathroom area, and his bedroom door. He stated that he set up a fake video camera and told other homosexuals that he had brought to his apartment that it would automatically turn on if his door opened up without the alarm being turned off. He stated all this was done in order to keep people from entering his apartment and discovering the evidence of his criminal acts. He stated that he drank excessively to try to forget the nightmare he felt he was living as he remembered the horror of some of the acts he had performed. He stated that he is deeply remorseful now for what he had done and wished that he had never started. He stated that he is not sure why he started committing these offenses and feels that in order to make restitution to the families of those he has killed, he would like to help the police in any way he can in trying to identify the victims.
Now, this conversation took place in the interrogation.
That's correct.
And you were present, Detective Kennedy was present, and Jeffrey Dahmer.
That's correct.
Is this something you do in the normal course of your business of asking people whether or not they think what they did was right or wrong?
That's correct.
Okay, so this was just normal. Nobody told you to go in and get him into that conversation.
No.
You wanted to know how he could have done all these things and what? Whether or not he understood that Were you testing whether or not he was sane or not?
And we're trying to get as much information as we can from him.
I understand that, but was a basis for this line of questioning to make a determination as an investigator whether you were dealing with somebody who might have not realized what they were doing to be right or wrong? Or was it just a matter of normal police
It's a
procedure?
matter of our questioning him, right?
Okay. And once he started talking to you about it, did he volunteer how he went about the business of covering it up or trying to cover up his crimes, or did you ask him? Why did you have the video camera there, and why did you have the alarm system? How did that go?
Well, the camera had been seen in there, and he had told us why he had bought it and that it was fake and where he had bought it and the reason for purchasing these items.
So he told you during the course of that conversation that he was trying very hard not to get caught doing the things he was doing.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, when you say that he was deeply remorseful, how did he express that? Was he crying yet?
No, he was not.
Have you ever seen him cry?
No, I did not.
Has he ever changed his demeanor from the time that you first saw him till the last time you saw him in that 60th hour?
Yes.
How did he change?
He became more relaxed with us. I think he accepted us more, became a little more friendlier, not as, at the beginning he wouldn't look us in the eyes. At the end he would look at us and communicate and talk with us.
But that was pretty much about the only difference?
Right, his speech was a little more freer. He would smile a little bit more. At the first couple of days, he wasn't smiling.
Then he
Later on,
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
later on, he would smile, crack jokes.
When you say he's cracking jokes, tell us about that.
Well, there was an instance when we were transporting him from the county jail to the city jail, to the Criminal Investigation Bureau, and he had not shaved at all. And as we're proceeding through the jail passageway, a female that had been arrested screamed and yelled, "There's Jeffrey Dahmer," and we had mentioned just prior, "Oh, you didn't shave today," and he said, "I didn't have time." And when she screamed, he said, "Well, I guess I should have shaved," and he just started to laugh.
That's about the first time he said something that was other than just reporting facts?
Yes,
First attempt at humor, right?
yes,
No humor connected with anything he did, though.
no,
He's very serious about that.
yes.
Tell us your next contact, please.
Next contact was on Thursday, July 25th.
This is the day after his arrest, second day after his arrest.
That's correct.
Okay, what time of the day was it?
We believe we're notified again by the jail that he wanted to speak with us. I believe it was in the morning.
Just so it's understood, all of the contacts after the initial contact, he requested your presence.
That's correct.
Is that out of the ordinary?
Well, once he had retained an attorney, we are no longer allowed to talk to an individual unless he requests to speak to us, and his attorney agrees.
But in your practice as a police officer, Jeffrey Dahmer was different than most. He was really unloading, was he not?
That's correct.
Okay, that's what I wanted to ask. Go ahead, continue and tell us what happened.
Okay, on Thursday, July 25th, we talked to Jeffrey, and he began speaking about his early teenage and high school years in Bath, Ohio. See, as a teenager of 15 or 16, he realized that he was a homosexual. He never had any interest in women, and he had no idea why he was a homosexual. But he distinctly remembers in high school and during his teenage years that he was only attracted to men. See, it was at this time he began to fantasize of killing human beings. He also began picking up animals which were found on the road, which had been killed apparently by other vehicles. He would bring them home to his house, and he would use a knife in order to cut them open, and see what was inside of them and what they looked like. See, several of the animals that he had cut up, he would completely strip down, the flesh and meaty areas, and then used bleach and various other liquids he found in his household to experiment to see which one would clean the bones the best. It was at this time he found a large dog that had been hit by a car, and he brought this dog home, cut it up, looked at its inside, completely cleaned it, then soaked the bones in a bleach solution, and he eventually planned to reconstruct the bones and mount the skeleton, much of the way a taxidermist would do it. He stated he never got the time to do this, so. During the time he was cutting up animals, he would fantasize what it would be like to cut up human beings. He realized at this early age that his homosexual fantasies and his fantasies of killing and dismembering human beings were interlocked. And he received gratification from these fantasies, and they occurred many times. He stated whenever he had these fantasies of homosexual activity, he also had fantasies of killing and dismembering. He also goes on to state that he felt that retrieving the road-killed animals and cutting them up satisfied his urges and his fantasies for killing and dismembering human beings. He went on to state that after leaving Bath, Ohio, to join the armed forces, and when he was stationed in Germany, we asked him why his behavior of cutting up animals and killing them and dismembering human beings did not occur. He stated he believed the reason he did not kill and dismember anymore while he was serving his tour of duty in Germany was because he enjoyed the structure of the Army. During the entire tour of duty, he lived on base and was in a dorm with 3 other men. He states he did not have any homosexual or heterosexual relationships while in Germany or in the Army, and he satisfied his sexual urges through masturbation. He stated that he enjoyed the Army and wished that he would have finished his entire tour of duty. However, his abuse of alcohol made it impossible, and the Army let him go 6 months before his tour of duty was up. We then questioned him about the bodies dismembered that were found in Germany, and he denied any knowledge of that. He stated that after he was released from the Army, he was tired of the cold winters that he endured in Ohio and Germany, and he went to Miami, Florida. He stated the entire time that he was in Miami, Florida, he did not engage in any homosexual activity, nor did he kill or dismember anyone down there. He stated he was continually busy trying to make ends meet financially while in Miami, and that's the reason he had no time to engage in any such activity. He stated at one time he was actually living on the beach in Miami, and eventually that's the reason he moved back to the Midwest, because he could not afford it. He said he moved back to Bath, Ohio for a short while and then moved in with his grandmother in West Dallas. This time he decided to make a concentrated effort to find some direction in his life. He went on to state he felt constantly lonely and empty without direction, and there was no meaning in life for him. His grandmother was a religious woman of the Protestant faith and a regular churchgoer, and talked to him several times about religion and how it could turn his life around. When he first moved to West Dallas, he had continual fantasies about homosexuality, and that, along with the homosexual fantasies, came the urges to dominate, to kill, and dismember other men. He continually fought these urges by going to church with his grandmother, by reading the Bible, and by trying to live his life in an orderly fashion, as he put it, to walk the straight and narrow. He said he constantly had interlocked feelings and fantasies of homosexual behavior, killing, and dismembering, and they finally overcame him as he was finding it more and more impossible to continue with the lifestyle of church-going and right living. He was then questioned regarding some skeleton bones that were found in the file cabinet in his bedroom at his residence, and he stated that this was from victim number 7, the black male that he met in December of 1990 by the bookstore on North 27th Street. This was a victim that he stabbed in the neck.
He said it was the only victim he stabbed.
Yes. Stated that the reason he did this was, the reason he stabbed him was because the potion that he had given him of the sleeping pills and alcohol was beginning to wear off, and this individual was rather strong and muscular, and he did not feel that he would be able to strangle him successfully without putting up a fight. So he took the knife and stabbed him once along the jugular vein in order to kill him. Stated that because this individual was the most attractive that he had met up until this time, he decided to clean and boil the entire skeleton in a solution of water and Soilex and save it. He states this is the reason he kept this individual with him as long as possible. The question regarding victim number 10, who was tentatively identified as Errol Lindsay, stated that this is the only victim that he completely took his skin off. He stated that this was done with a very small, very sharp paring knife, and it took him approximately 2 hours to completely take the skin off his victim. He stated he also, while doing this, he left the cartilage, ligaments, and fleshy muscular areas all intact. We talked to him about his personal relationships, and he said he had no close friends, and he is basically a loner. He stated he is a loner by choice. He never had any success in continuing any long-range relationships. He stated he had friends in high school, but never any best friends that he could continually hang around with. He states he likes to be alone. He specifically likes to be alone when he kills people and cuts them up because it makes him more secure and more dominant. At this time, he went on.
I would like you to continue on at what he said when he was younger about starting cutting up animals, please.
Pardon me?
I'd like you to start with 2 lines down, where he stated when he was younger, he started cutting up animals. In other words, the next...
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Right. He stated that when he was younger, he started cutting up animals. He enjoyed the excitement of cutting them up, and he wished now that he would have just continued to cut up animals and would have stopped with them and not having moved on to human beings. He felt that he originally only started it for the curiosity.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to ask you a couple of questions, take away from just reading the confession as we're approaching 5 o'clock. You have handled how many homicides in your career as a Milwaukee detective? Investigation? Hundreds?
Hundreds.
Hundreds. Have you ever had anyone talk to you about their conduct relative to the commission of homicides as fully and as completely and as much as did Jeffrey Dahmer?
Not in the magnitude. In individual homicides, I've had people that have told me everything, but in a case such as this, no one that would continually talk to us.
As an experienced investigator, you had to ask him his motives.
Yes,
You've already alluded to that from time to time in what he has told you. You knew him to be a homosexual based upon what he told you.
that's correct.
Did you know of anything that contradicted that fact?
Nothing.
You knew that the majority, many of his victims were homosexual.
That's correct.
Did you ask him if these were homosexual killings?
Homosexual, I asked him why he picked these people. He said because they accepted his offer.
That's right. He wasn't out to hurt homosexuals, was he?
No, he was not.
Now, you knew that the racial components of some of these victims were black, some Hispanic, some whites.
That's correct.
Did you ask him if these were racially motivated killings?
Yes, I did.
What did he tell you?
He says race, creed, color had nothing to do with it. It was the opportunity and whoever accepted his offer.
Did he also discuss with you the bodies of the people he chose?
Yes, he did.
What did he tell you about that?
Basically, when he would look for people with the same physical stature
Of what?
of kind of tall, thin, younger looking, between his mid-teens, late teens, early 20s.
The kind of person he wanted was a person of a certain physique.
That's correct.
May we approach the bench, Your Honor? You to question Jeffrey Dahmer's statement that these killings were for the motives that he said, and they were not racially motivated nor sexual preference motivated?
No reason to question it.
You believed him when he told you that?
That's correct.
You knew of no evidence to the contrary, did you?
None whatsoever at that time.
That's all I have, Your Honor. Till tomorrow.
Okay, we'll break for the evening at this point. It's just about exactly 5 o'clock. We'll reconvene at 8:30 tomorrow morning.
How this transpired, and he stated that he was driving southbound on Cleveland and Maslin, that's Massillon Road. And it was warm out because the victim was not wearing a shirt. He stated he thought it was early fall, but he was not sure. He said he was driving southbound on Cleveland and Maslin Road. He saw the hitchhiker, picked him up at Ball and Cleveland and Maslin Road. He discussed with this individual about buying or smoking pot and drinking. They decided to go to his residence. He said this was later in the afternoon, probably the early evening hours. He went back to his residence and no one was home. His father was living in a motel complex about 5 to 10 miles away, and his mother had already moved to Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin. When they arrived at home, they went into his bedroom and were drinking beer, and after a while, the victim wanted to leave. Jeff stated he wanted the victim to stay. The victim was sitting either on the bed or in a chair in the bedroom. He approached him from behind and hit him with a barbell in the head, and then used the barbell to strangle him. After this occurred, he states he put him in a crawl space under the house, subsequently dismembered him in the same crawl space. After he dismembered him, he put the body in plastic bags, put the bags in the back seat of a blue four-door auto that was in the garage. He stated this was about 3 a.m. in the morning. And as he was driving, he was stopped by officers who stated that he was driving left of center. He stated he was given a drunken driving test, which he passed, and then allowed to drive away. He states he thinks he had gotten a ticket, but he was not sure.
There was, the remains of Mr. Hicks were in his car in bags?
Yes, they were in 3.
They obviously were not discovered. There was no search.
That's correct.
Go ahead, please.
He states he then returned home, put the bags in a drainage pipe behind the house and let them there for a couple of weeks. After this time, he took the bags out, broke the bones up in little pieces, and proceeded to a rocky cliff area in the back side of his house, just to the rear, about 10 feet above the ground, and spread the bones around this area. He stated he then burned the victim's identification clothes.
Now, did you subsequently learn that the destruction of the remains of Mr. Hicks did not take place as he initially told you? That the destruction of the remains of Mr. Hicks did not take place as he initially told you. There was a longer lapse of time. Did you subsequently learn that?
We received information in the last week that it was quite some time afterwards.
Okay. Go ahead, please continue.
One question regarding any further identification of this individual, Mr. Dahmer stated he believed the victim had been wearing a necklace or something that appeared to be a necklace that had teeth braces on him. He stated he disposed of these by throwing them in a river near the sewage plant. We then questioned him whether or not he continued his education when he went to Ohio State University in August of '78. He stated he committed the homicide just prior to going to school, and he thought it was at least 2 weeks prior to enrolling. He wasn't sure the exact time or month, but he did admit committing the homicide. And upon viewing the photos, hearing the name, he states that this is in fact the person that he had killed. We then had Mr. Dahmer draw a diagram of the crawl space, the drainage pipe, the cliff area and where he disposed of the body. And on the reverse side, we had him show where he disposed of the bones. The drawing was signed by Mr. Dahmer, initialed by myself, Detective Karabasis, and Lieutenant Muncie. This was retained by Lieutenant Muncie for their investigation in Ohio. I then asked Mr. Dahmer where he bought the chemicals used, namely the rheumatic acid.
That's for the Milwaukee slaying?
Yes.
Go ahead.
He stated that he bought them at Ace Hardware on 4th Street, right near Lapham Lighting. He bought 4 boxes a few days before his arrest, 4 one
gallon drums in each box. He says just after the last homicide that he was going to use the chemicals in a 57-gallon barrel. He states he bought the ether, chloroform, and other chemicals at Labs Pharmacy on 27th and Kilbourne. He also stated that jewelry that he had sold at work, which was a necklace with an Italian horn on, was his, and he did not sell or keep anything from any other victims. He was questioned again regarding the bones and skeletons that were found in a drawer in his residence, and he stated that they belonged to the same person whose arm was in the freezer, and this is the person he met in the vicinity of the bookstore on 27th Street that he killed approximately 1 year ago. He was then questioned regarding where he had worked when he moved to Miami Beach from the service. He stated he worked at a Sunshine Subs shop, which was privately owned and was on Collins Avenue, approximately 1.5 mile from the motel he was staying in. At this time, the interview was terminated, but during the interview, Mr. Dahmer had requested cigarettes several times, requested to smoke, and he could not smoke in the county jail. This time I had went to the judge and got an order to produce, which is an order that allows me to take him from the county jail over to the Criminal Investigation Bureau. I did this at the request of Mr. Dahmer, his attorney, and so we could all sit together and talk with him regarding this investigation. We met with his attorney prior to these statements at the Criminal Investigation Bureau after I obtained his order to produce, and this is where all these statements were taken. I then, after the statements were taken, just prior to his return to the county jail, I informed Mr. Hansen that Mr. Dahmer has been requesting our presence every day and stating that he does not want to talk to his attorney or does not need him present during the interviews.
What you're telling us is you're talking to Mr. Hansen from my
Yes.
office, and you informed him that Mr. Dahmer has been asking to see you and that he wants to talk to you whether we're there or not.
That's correct.
And we asked you to notify us when that took place, correct?
That's correct.
There was nothing to impede your progress of talking to him at any time by any attorney at all, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Why don't you continue on to the next time that you talk with Mr. Dahmer, please?
Okay, and before returning Mr. Dahmer to the county jail, I met with Detective Kenneth Reese, it's R-I-S-S-E, and Detective Guy Novak, N-O-V-A-K, from the West Allis Police Department. And they asked to talk to Mr. Dahmer regarding the homicides in West Allis.
Now we're on to Friday. These arrests took place on what day of the week?
The 25th.
20.
Oh, this is the 26th also, Friday the 26th.
Friday. So
Yes.
it would have been Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday?
Yes,
So he was taken into custody Tuesday morning or Monday morning?
Tuesday the 23rd.
Yeah, okay. So this is about 3 days later?
Yes.
Okay, continue on, please.
He's questioned Mr. Dahmer regarding the homicides that took place in West Allis, and he stated that he possibly killed his first victim at the Ambassador Hotel because he thought he took him up there, because he stated he took him up there, gave him the potion, and passed out. He did not remember beating him about the chest.
The Ambassador Hotel's at about 21st and Wisconsin Avenue in Milwaukee.
2308 West Wisconsin.
In Milwaukee?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, please.
He stated that when he woke up, the victim was dead next to him, and he purchased a suitcase that he picked up at the Grand Avenue Mall, put him in the suitcase, took a cab to his grandmother's house on South 57th Street, where he subsequently dismembered the body and disposed of the bones and tissue in the garbage. Regarding the second victim that he took to West Allis, he stated he met him at the 219 Club. He went with him in the City Vet cab. He readily admitted killing him the same way as the other victims. He stated he believed this individual lived in the vicinity of 10th and National because he thinks this is what this individual had told him. He also stated that he offered this individual money for sex, and that's the reason the individual went with him. The third victim in West Allis, he recalls that about 2 weeks after the homicide, he was reading a personal section in the paper, and there was a small photo of this victim. It listed him as missing and requested information regarding the individual. He states he did not recall the name, but he does recall seeing the photo in the personal section of the paper.
But he wasn't looking for information such as that, was he?
No.
He just ran across it,
That's correct.
and he didn't do anything about it.
No.
Continue, please.
He states that when he returned these victims to his grandmother's house, it was usually in the middle of the night, and usually on a Saturday night. And when he brought victim number 1, it was in the middle of the night, and the next day, Sunday, when his grandmother went to church, was when he dismembered the body, cut it up in little pieces, removed the flesh, muscle, and tissue before breaking up the bones. Stated he never kept any part of these. He also...
Did he tell you why he was doing this as his way of doing things on a Saturday night? Did you ask him why he would do this on Saturday nights?
He was off Saturday nights, and he could go out on Saturday nights. He had Sunday to dispose of the body, and Monday he went back to work.
And he could dispose of it also because his grandmother would be out of the house in the morning.
In church, yes.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
He also did this with victim number 2, brought him over on a Saturday night, dismembered the body on Sunday morning. He states that when he took victim number 3 over to the house, he also had taken a cab there and was dropped off 2 blocks away, usually in the vicinity of the Mai Kai Tavern, which is on 5630 West Lincoln Avenue, I believe.
But that was just where you'd drop him off.
Right.
Yeah.
And then
He wouldn't go into that tavern.
No, he would be dropped off at the corner, and then he would walk over to his grandmother's residence.
Okay.
He stated that this way, no one would know where his grandmother lived or where he was staying. He stated that the pills that he used were sleeping pills,
Yeah, okay, good.
and they were prescribed by Dr. Olson of West Allis Hospital. He states that there was one more occurrence that happened, but this time the individual woke up prior to him being able to kill him, and he was also seen by his grandmother with this individual in the basement, and he decided not to kill him. He stated that he did walk this individual to the bus stop and returned to his residence. It was shortly after this that his grandmother asked him to leave the house.
You mean to leave the house as a order?
Yes.
Okay.
A check with West Allis revealed that there was a theft complaint filed on April 4th, 1988 by Ronald Flowers, who was the alleged victim, and case number it gives. Regarding the 4th victim, who was subsequently identified as Anthony Sears, he stated he met this victim a few weeks before he went into the work release program. He stated he was with him and was dropped off again by the Mai Kai Lounge around Easter of 1989. In fact, he stated it was the night before Easter, Saturday before Easter. He stated that this did happen after his arrest for taking the sexual pictures of the juvenile, but he was at his grandmother's house. He stated after bringing this individual to the house on Saturday night, he did have sex with him, cut him up, disposed of the body in the same manner, except for keeping his head, his scalp, and his genitals. He stated he disposed of the body on Easter Sunday. The West Allis officers then questioned regarding any other information relative to other homicides in their jurisdiction, and he denied any knowledge of these things.
But he also said if he does recall anything, he would contact you so that you could inform them of further information.
That's correct.
Okay. Go ahead, please.
In regards to the interview of his father?
Well, yeah, after there was he called to talk to you folks again on an emergency,
okay.
right?
Yes. I went with West Allis to their department, and while there I received a call that Mr. Dahmer requested to talk to me again.
That he had something important to tell you.
Right. So I returned to the county jail, where Mr. Dahmer informed me that he forgot to tell me about an incident that occurred about 1 year ago, where one of them got away. I asked him what he meant, and he stated that he had picked up an Hispanic male for the purpose of taking photos and having sex. He brought him over to his residence at 924 North 25th Street. He stated this had occurred prior to victim number 7. He states that when he brought this individual over, he He did not have any more sleeping pills left, so he attempted to knock him out by hitting him in the back of his head with his fist or hand. He stated this did not work. The Hispanic male fought with him, and after a while they made up, and he stayed there the remainder of the night and left in the morning. Mr. Dahmer stated he had forgotten about this, but he wanted to get it out. I asked him if he recalled any other incidents that were like this or that occurred, and he stated he did not. I then informed him that I had just spoken with his father and received information that he may have had a sexual experience when he was 14 or 15 with a person who lived in the area. Mr. Dahmer stated that this did occur.
Mr. Dahmer, meaning Jeffrey Dahmer.
Jeffrey Dahmer, yes. And this person and Mr. Dahmer and Jeffrey had gotten undressed and did some body rubbing and kissing. I asked him if he recalled the
Well,
name.
I don't
Yeah,
think we should mention
okay.
names, yeah.
And he did. He stated he did not consider this a homosexual experience at the time, but he stated after thinking about it, I guess it is.
The person that he was talking about was the same age as him.
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead, please.
I then asked him if he acquired a fish tank, and he stated he bought it about 6 months ago because he developed an interest in it at this time. I then informed him that there were numerous allegations made against him by people calling, and went through a stack of the allegations, at which time he denied any of these.
And that's about people thinking that he committed other homicides, and he said, these are the only ones I've done, I didn't do those. Is that what you mean, he denied them?
Right.
Okay, go ahead.
I asked Mr. Dahmer if he had anything more to tell me and why he did not request to have his attorney prior to talking to me, and he stated he did not want his attorney there, he just wanted to tell me about this and other things that he had forgotten, and he did not need his attorney present.
That's on the thing that you said he called you about to want to tell you about the fellow that got away.
That's correct.
Okay?
I asked him if he felt he needed the attorney for any other question, and he stated he felt he did not because he had been truthful with me the whole time, and he does not feel he needs an attorney present when I'm there.
When you're there.
Yes.
Okay,
Or Detective Kennedy.
sure.
I again informed him of his attorney's request that he contact the attorney prior to contacting us, and he stated he understands, and if he feels he has something important enough to tell us, he will call us. Or me. I then informed him again that his attorney had requested his cooperation, and he stated he would consider it.
How many times has this type of thing happened between you and a suspect or a charged defendant in a criminal case during the many years you've been a detective, where they just continue to want to talk to you in spite of having lawyers?
It's, as I said, in a case like this where there's continuous investigation, I've had cases where, many cases where the defendants told me everything.
Sure.
Without their attorney, said they didn't need an attorney.
This is a rarity.
This one is yes.
Yeah, okay. Continue on, please.
Excuse me. On Monday, 7/29/91, we again received a call that Jeffrey Dahmer wanted to speak to us. Approximately 10 a.m., we obtained an order to produce, proceeded to the Sheriff's Department, and informed that Mr. Boyle was there with a psychiatrist, so we waited until they were finished, and then we proceeded to the Criminal Investigation Bureau. Jeffrey stated he wanted to talk to us, and wanted to talk to us even though his attorney wasn't present, because he stated he told us everything already. He stated he was not involved in any other crimes, and that he will talk to us regarding anything or answer any questions we may have relative to this investigation. We asked him if he wanted to again call his attorney, and he stated no, he'd wait until she arrives. We then asked him several questions regarding the statement he made regarding the homicide in Bath, Ohio, in regards to a call received from Lieutenant Richard Muncie relative to the investigation. I asked him what he had done with the knife that he used to cut up the victim, Stephen Hicks, and he stated he believes he threw it in the river. I questioned him as to whose car he used when he stated he was driving down the road when he picked up the hitchhiker in the car and later returned after the death, and he stated he was using his father's blue four-door auto, which he let him use to go to a movie. He indicated that his mother was already in Chippewa Falls and his father was still living in a motel at this time. He stated his mother was gone when he killed Stephen Hicks. I also questioned regarding how much time he spent with the victim prior to killing him, and he stated they were together for a couple of hours and they were just drinking beer. He then went back to his earlier childhood, excuse me, where he had been cutting up dogs, and I asked him if he did in fact ever cut up a dog and hang it up in a tree in Ohio. And he stated he only hung up one dog in a tree. He doesn't know why he did it. He also stated he does not, nor did he have any girlfriends in Milwaukee or in Ohio. He did admit going to a prom, but stated he only went to see what it was like because he was a junior, and the girl he went was with a senior, and it was just more or less to accompany each other to the prom. He did not recall any other information regarding a Bath, Ohio homicide at this time.
On the 29th of July, because of information that was coming into your apartment, you and Mr. Dahmer had some discussions about some happenings or alleged happenings in Germany when he was in the military in the late 70s, correct?
Yes, sir.
Can you tell us whether or not there's been any corroboration of anything of an independent nature relative to some conduct of his in Germany, or can we just go on to what happened subsequent to that?
We can continue on. There has been nothing.
Okay, let's go. What is the next thing that the exhibit reflects relative to work of the Milwaukee Police Department in this investigation, please?
On Monday the 29th, myself, Detective Murphy, and Detective Kennedy, in the presence of Wendy Patrikas, we showed him numerous photographs of missing males. He viewed these photographs.
And I take it on that occasion when you were showing him photographs, he was assisting in identification and did identify some for you and did not identify others, is that
That's
right?
correct.
Okay. But there's nothing of any substance that went on other than the fact that he was cooperating with hoping to identify victims of his homicides, right?
Right, he did identify some of the victims at this
Okay.
session.
Would you tell us at that session which victims he identified?
Okay, we showed him a photograph of David C. Thomas, and he stated, "This looks like the victim who I possibly killed after the man in the bookstore," who was identified as victim number 8. A follow-up was given to Detective O'Keefe to take this photograph along with another photograph to the victim's family in order to make identification, and subsequently identification was made that this in fact was one of his victims.
Okay.
Next, a BFI photograph was shown to him of Richard Guerrero. He stated that he could not be sure, but the victim who was victim number 3 in Milwaukee was a Hispanic male that had had his photograph in the personals in the Milwaukee Journal. A copy of this paper was obtained from January 7th, 1989, and upon viewing this photograph in the personals, he stated, "Yes, this is a Hispanic male I killed at my grandmother's house." He further stated that this occurred in March of 1988 in West Allis. On Tuesday, 7/30/91, while questioning Mr. Dahmer in the presence of his attorney, Wendy Patrikas, we showed him a photo array consisting of 4 Hispanic males. Upon viewing this photo array, he picked out the photograph and stated that this looks like the first Hispanic male that I met on 2nd Street. This photograph was that of James Dockstetter, who had an address of 1010 West Pierce at the time and was reported missing on 1/18/88. Further investigation, subsequently, identification was made that this was in fact one of his victims.
Now we're into Monday, the 29th.
Yes. We continue to question Mr. Dahmer regarding the Asian male that he had met at the Grand Avenue Mall. He stated that he met him while he was walking around the Grand Avenue Mall. He indicated that after introducing himself to the victim, he offered him $50 to accompany him back to his apartment to pose, have some drinks, and watch videos. He stated that he advised the Asian male that the posing would be in the nude or semi-nude states.
This is the young man that was subsequently slain.
Yes.
Go ahead.
The Asian male agreed to accompany him back to his apartment. They went to the 25th Street address by bus. He feels it was about 5 p.m. when they got there, and once inside the apartment, the victim disrobed down to his black bikini panties, and he posed for several photographs, which Mr. Dahmer took with his Polaroid camera. These photos were recovered and are on police inventory.
Recovered from Mr. Dahmer's apartment.
Yes.
Go ahead.
During the time of the posing, he also mixed him a drink of rum, coffee, and sleeping pills, and gave it to the victim, and he drank it. He then stated during the entire time the victim spoke in perfect English. He was completely able to understand English and spoke it fluently. He indicated that it was about this time the rum coffee concoction with the sleeping pills began to take effect, and the victim became drowsy. Excuse me. And he walked him into the bedroom area. During the time he walked him into the bedroom area and sat him on the bed, Mr. Dahmer states that the victim, Tony Hughes, whom he had killed several days earlier, was lying naked on the bedroom floor. He stated that the Asian boy, he believes he saw him, but he did not react to it. He feels this was because of the rum and coffee and sleeping pill mixture. Stated
No, it was what, he felt that it was beginning to affect him, and that's why he didn't see it.
yes.
Okay, go ahead.
He went on to state he put on a video, they watched it until the victim fell asleep. During the time, he began kissing and body rubbing with the victim, and he feels he may have had oral sex, mouth to penis, on the victim. However, he denied any sex with penis to anus on the victim. After he realized he was unable to arouse the victim by mouth to penis sex and by body rubbing and kissing him, he continued to watch the video and drink beer until he himself fell asleep. After a few hours, he woke up. It was quite late out, approximately 11 or 12 p.m., at 11 p.m. to 12 a.m., or maybe a little later. He realized the victim was still sleeping because of the effects of the drink he gave him, so he decided to go to the tavern located on 27th, just north of Kilburn, the Care Bear Bar. He continued drinking there. And at closing time, excuse me, after leaving the tavern, he began walking eastbound on West State Street. He observed the victim, the Asian boy, sitting completely naked on the southeast corner of 25th and State. The victim was sitting on the curb. He stated there were two black females standing by him, and they appeared to be hysterical. He walked up to the victim, whom he realized was speaking to the black females in Asian. The victim was disoriented and appeared to be intoxicated by alcohol. However, Mr. Dahmer realized that he must still be under the influence of the drink containing the sleeping pills that he had given him. This time he advised the ladies that the victim was in fact a friend of his. He attempted to pull the victim in the direction of the apartment. He stated that the women continued screaming at him, we don't know if you really know this guy, and we called the police. Why don't you wait until the police get here? He continued pulling the victim towards his apartment, and the victim did offer slight resistance to this. He states when he got to the alley behind the Hong, H-O-N-G, Fat Company, he noticed a fire department approaching from the east of the alley, and the Milwaukee Police Department was coming from the west end of the alley. This time, the victim had a slight laceration above his left eye and was bleeding from this.
Did he tell you how he got that laceration
No.
of his left eye?
He just observed a slight laceration, saw blood.
By a slight laceration, mean a little cut?
Yes,
Okay. And did he indicate how much bleeding? Little bleeding?
a little bleeding, yeah.
Okay.
He stated at this time there were no signs of blood from either the anal or genital area of the victim.
And why, did he volunteer that, or did you ask him the question about that?
We asked him if he saw any other blood on the victim's body anywhere, and the fact that he had told us he had had sex with him, first just oral sex, we wanted to make sure that there wasn't actually any anal sex, and we asked him, was there any blood coming from his anal area, or was there any blood anywhere on his body, his knees, his arms, anything else, and he said no.
Had there been a claim that made to you that there had been some sightings of blood on the youngster's body?
There was accusations that the youngster had been bleeding, possibly from the anal area.
That was a claim.
Yes,
Mr. Dahmer denied that that was a fact.
Yes,
And he denied that he had done anything to that youngster of that nature prior to him leaving to go drinking, right?
that's correct.
And he didn't see anything in that area, in any of the private parts area where there's any blood, correct?
He did not.
Okay, go ahead.
He says, as the fire, excuse me, as the fire and police department arrived, he stopped with the boy and noticed that the fire department personnel simply stood by and did not make any efforts to attend to the victim. He stated he feels the police took a yellow plastic type blanket and wrapped it around the boy, and he noticed the black females who had been seen with the boy on 25th and State appeared to be hysterical and were screaming at the police officers. At this time, he stated a police officer approached him and asked him what was going on. He stated he handed the police his Ambrosia Chocolate Company personnel ID and stated who he was and gave a fake name for the victim.
So he told them who he was, the police,
Yes,
but he didn't tell the real name of the victim.
that's correct.
Go ahead.
He stated he believes he told the police that the victim was 19 years old, and he thought that was appropriate, as although the victim was young, he believed him to be approximately that age. He stated he told the police that the victim was, in fact, a close friend of his and gave him the fake name. He indicated that the victim had stayed with him several times in the past and that whenever he drinks, he gets crazy and has been known to walk out of the apartment in the nude. He stated the officers attempted to speak with the victim. However, he stood there speaking only in an Asian dialect and appeared to be intoxicated and smelled of alcohol. He states at this time he feels he convinced the police that this was some type of homosexual relationship that had some alcohol problems and that he would take care of the victim if he was allowed to return with him to his apartment. States at this time the two officers escorted both he and the victim back into his apartment building. Went on to state that during the time the officers were speaking with him regarding the Asian boy, the black females who had been screaming hysterically in the beginning of this left the scene. However, he is not sure where they went. He related that the victim was in no way an acquaintance of his before this evening. He had never seen him before and had absolutely no idea that he was, in fact, the brother of the minor that he had taken pictures of in an earlier offense in 1988. He indicated that it was a chance meeting at the Grand Avenue Mall, and that to his knowledge, besides this offense and the offense where he took pictures of the Asian boy, there have been no other encounters, either personally, casually, or sexually, with any other Oriental males. At this time, we questioned Mr. Dahmer as to the bleeding from the anus of the victim and whether or not the bleeding would be visible to police officers. He stated emphatically that there was no blood coming down from the anus or genital area of the victim. He had not had any anal intercourse or injured the victim in any way prior to meeting with the police. He stated that the night was pitch black and the alley was also dark. He feels police attempted to interview and investigate the incident to the best of their ability at that time. However, he feels he was able to convince police of the homosexual nature of the incident, and in fact, convince him that all would be well if he was allowed to assist in taking care of the victim.
Will you tell us when you next spoke to Mr. Dahmer regarding any other matters? Same day?
Same day.
Once again, he requested to speak to you,
Yes,
and you brought him over to the Police Administration Building. Correct?
that's correct.
He talked to you without his attorney being present,
Yes,
and that was because he wanted to.
yes, sir. Again, on Monday, the 29th, we continued to question him regarding offenses. And at this time, we asked him questions regarding patties of meat that were found in the lower part of his freezer in his apartment. To this, he stated that they weren't exactly patties. He said they were strips of muscle and flesh that he had cut off his 13th victim. He states he met this victim in front of the bus station. And the reason these were not thrown out, along with other parts found with these so-called patties, was because he placed them on the standing at the bottom of the freezer in a bag, and they became frozen to the bottom, and he was unable to get them out. He stated his usual routine after cutting up victims was to throw out only 2 and possibly 3 bags of human flesh and bones at a time. And at this time, he would hide the bags underneath other bags of garbage which were located in the dumpster behind his apartment. He stated the remainder of the flesh, chunks and strips of body parts which he had cut off the victims, he would place in plastic bags and freeze them until a more appropriate time to throw them out. He said this was done in order to stop detection of his crime. He felt that if he would throw out the entire cut-up body parts at one time, it would be easier for people to detect his activities, so therefore he would freeze them, keep them refrigerated, until he was able to more discreetly dispose of them through the garbage. We then questioned him regarding the computer in his apartment, and he stated he bought this. Became interested in when he was in the House of Correction. Thought it would be fun and interesting, but he disregarded this later on.
He bought a computer, he thought he'd use it, but he never used it.
Right.
Did you ask him whether or not he had any data concerning any of his homicidal conduct on any of the discs?
Yes.
And what did he tell you?
No, he did not.
Do you know anything to the difference?
No.
Okay.
They were checked.
They were checked and you can't find that he was telling you the truth.
That's correct.
Okay, go ahead. You talked to him regarding an incident when he was in the military.
Yes.
Tell us about that, please.
We asked him whether or not he had been in Columbus, Georgia, or Fort Bennings. Jeffrey stated that while he was taking his military police training at Fort McClellan, Alabama, he kept getting drunk on base and ended up getting beaten up by several other members of his unit. He stated they did this because he had caused the entire platoon to suffer extra physical training and punishment because of his abusive drinking patterns. He stated that
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
He stated that one day after the entire unit was disciplined because of one of his infractions, a large black private and a large white private took him into the men's room and physically beat him bloody.
And that was because he was causing the entire platoon by his conduct to get extra duty.
That's correct.
And they were extracting some measure of retaliation on him.
Yes.
Go ahead.
During his beating, he received a concussion, and his the eardrum of his left ear was fractured. He stated that from this injury, he was transferred to Fort Bennings in Georgia for treatment. He was only there a couple of days and returned to his barracks in Fort McClellan. He stated that after washing out of the MP training school, he was transferred to Fort Sam Houston in Texas, where he trained as a medic. He stated this training agreed with him more, and he felt that he did well while there. And then the question regarding his membership in the health club.
Was that of any value to you?
No.
And how about questioning where his locker was at the place where he worked? Did you talk to him about that?
Yes, we did.
He identified where his locker was?
Locker number 214.
Okay, and so he was cooperative and told you could go in there if you wanted to?
Yes.
Or did you guys do that?
Yes.
Did you recover things there? You take things out of that locker that you inventoried?
Yes, I believe they were.
Okay, but what I'm saying is he was cooperative. He didn't make you get a search warrant or anything.
That's correct.
Okay, continue on, please.
We then questioned him as to how long ago he bought his standing freezer found in the apartment that he had kept the body parts in. He stated he bought the freezer several months after he had killed the victim known as Cash D. He stated the reason he bought this freezer was because he was having difficulty storing the cut-up flesh and bones which he cut from his victims. He stated that by buying the freezer, it would be easier for him to store the cut-up flesh and bones until he was able to dispose of them discreetly through the garbage at the rear of his apartment. Regarding the penis from the black male which he kept and which he painted white, he stated he bought the skin color paint and painted the penis simply because it seemed like a fascinating idea and he wanted the penis to look more natural. He was unable to give any other reason why he painted it. Regarding the head of victim, Braidhoff, and why it was partially decomposed when it was found in the freezer, Jeffrey stated that he killed the victim, placed him on the bed in his bedroom and covered him with a blanket and left him there approximately 2 days. He remembers it was hot during those 2 days and the air conditioning in his apartment does not really cool off the bedroom that well. He stated it had been at least a day and a half before he checked on his victim, and when he pulled the blankets back, after approximately 2 days, he noticed decomposition had already begun and the head had acquired some maggots. He quickly cut up the victim, disposed of him in the usual way, except for keeping the head and placing it in the freezer. Question regarding a black nylon strap, which he stated he used to strangle several of his victims, and which was photographed by himself hanging one of his victims from the shower in his bathroom. Questioned him regarding the whereabouts of this strap, and he stated that he was unsure which victim he got rid of the strap with. However, he stated it became soaked with blood, and he decided to throw it out, and he disposed of it through the garbage in the alley behind the apartment building. Questioned him regarding the knives he had used, a large knife with a 6-inch blade and a black plastic handle. He states he bought it at a knife shop in the mall and had returned to the mall at least 2 to 3 times in order to get it sharpened, as the store would sharpen a knife for free. He stated this is a knife he used most often for cutting up his victims. However, 2 small 3-inch bladed paring knives with black plastic handles, which he bought at a Kitchen Mart in Grand Avenue. He did use these knives, but they were not very strong. Excuse me. The smaller of the 2 paring knives, one which is depicted in one of the photos, he stated he used to carve the skin off the one victim that he totally skinned. We then questioned him regarding a battery complaint he filed with the Milwaukee Police Department in November of 1988. He stated he met an individual and asked him to come back to his apartment for pictures. Stated although he no longer lived at this apartment, which was 808 North 24th Street, he had just moved out in October, he felt it would still be vacant. He stated he still had the key to the apartment, and he and the subject went back to the apartment. Upon attempting to enter, he realized it was rented out and a female was living there. Upon realizing this, he and the subject walked down the stairwell of the apartment building and continued to drink beer. He said, went on to indicate that after all the beer was gone, he bent over and received a hard blow from behind. He was unsure what he was struck with, however, he was intoxicated, and then the blow was so hard he knows he passed out. He stated he came to when he was at the police station, and that the officers, after taking his complaint, took him to West Allis Hospital where he was stitched up. He believes the subject, who was a black male, also stole $350 from his pocket, and he does remember coming down to the 3rd floor of the police administration building, viewing photos in an attempt to identify this individual, but he could not.
Skip to the next paragraph. That's an immaterial fact, correct? That was a discussion about somebody that he didn't know, and it was found that he didn't know the person.
That's correct.
Okay, go on.
We then questioned him regarding the victim. Apparently, he had killed and left lying around his apartment. He stated he never left anyone for more than 2 days. However, he did leave several of his victims uncut and naked, lying about his apartment, either in his bed or on his bedroom floor. He stated there were several reasons why he did this. The first one was because on several other victims he intended and did return at a later date and had oral and anal sex and kissing and touching of the body after they were dead. He also stated that sometimes, because of time constraints and work, he was unable to proceed with cutting up and disposing of the bodies at the time, so he simply left them there. He stated also that there were other items, because of his drinking and late hours he was keeping. He was just too exhausted to try to cut up the body and dispose of it, so he left him lay there.
You became aware of the fact that while he had been incarcerated, asking to be released from his incarceration at the House of Correction, that he wrote a letter to the presiding judge over his case, correct?
That's correct.
And that was of interest because of some of the things he said in that letter?
Yes.
And you were asking him whether or not he wrote the letter or not?
Yes.
And he said he did, but it was really copied it from somebody else, right?
That's correct.
Okay. You want to go on to the next time you question about why it was so long between his first homicide and his next homicide?
We then questioned Mr. Dahmer regarding the period of time which lapsed between his homicide in Bath, Ohio, and the first homicide he committed in Milwaukee. We established that the Milwaukee homicide occurred actually in November of 1987. And this was the one at the Ambassador Hotel. He stated that he feels the first homicide that occurred in Bath, Ohio was unplanned and somewhat of an accident. He stated this haunted him terribly for years, and he had nightmares and was troubled by it during the entire time he was in the service. He emphatically denied committing any crimes while he was in the United States Armed Forces, and states he feels that one of the reasons he did not get involved in criminal activity was because of the structure of the military and the fact that he never had a residence or an apartment of his own. I feel he was continually surrounded by other soldiers and did not have an opportunity to commit any offenses. Stated after leaving the military and moving to Miami, Florida, he was short on funds, was living on the beach after he ran out of cash. He lived on the beach for approximately 2 months in between hotels, and he did not have an opportunity to commit an offense. He was busy working at the sub shop trying to make money, trying to find a place to stay in Miami, and it did not turn out to be the opportunity that he felt it would. He then ended up calling his relative, advising him of his financial problems in Miami, and he received a plane ticket to return to Ohio, and then subsequently moved to West Dallas.
That was help he got from his father to get him back to the Midwest, right?
Yes,
But then he then ended up staying there for the period of time you said, and then he went on to West Dallas.
yes.
Okay, go ahead, please.
When he first moved to West Dallas with his grandmother, it was at this time he decided to try and put behind him the nightmare he had constantly relived regarding his first homicide.
Can I just interject here? Is he telling, who's in the room when he's talking to you about this? Just you and Detective Kennedy?
Yes,
No attorney?
no attorneys.
So he's telling you and he's answering your questions as you two are putting them to him.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
He stated his grandmother was a religious woman. At this time, he began attending church with her and apparently was looking into religious ideals in an attempt to change his life. He stated he recalls reading the Bible and attempting to look for a job and live the so-called straight and narrow life.
That's a quote by him, straight and narrow life.
Yes. He states that although he constantly tried to delve into the religious aspects of life, he constantly had fantasies of homosexual activity and mutilation of human beings. He stated that eventually during this period of time, the fantasies and the urges, as he called them, the darker side, bothered him, and he decided to quit attending church and looking into religion, and for a while delved into the occult.
You put a parentheses around the words, the darker side. Is that because he used those words, the darker side?
Yes.
Go ahead, please.
He stated he felt he did this because since religion wasn't working, maybe he should just delve into the occult and to Satanism. However, after reading several books and dabbling in it, he realized this was not for him, and he then gave in to his homosexual tendencies. He stated he began going to the bookstores where he obtained information regarding gay areas in Milwaukee. He stated he also started reading gay and homosexual pornography and eventually became acquainted with the bars in the homosexual areas of town. From there, he began to frequent the gay baths and was a regular member of the gay baths, and spent several nights there. He in fact stated that several times he used liquor which he had tampered with by putting his sleeping pills in the gay baths. He states he did not commit any violent acts while there. He only drugged some of his friends who he had met and spent the night with in the gay baths.
But he met him in the gay bath?
Right.
Okay.
He stated he believes this is the reason why there was such a long span between homicides, as he was going through all these mental changes, trying to leave the old life behind, and at once he finally again gave in to his homosexual desires that is coming out of his days. So he used a knife to cut him in the carotid artery. He stated that by cutting the carotid artery of the victim, the blood began to spatter all over the bed and the walls. He did not do a very good job on cleaning up the blood afterward, and this was remaining blood which is located on the wall and in the bedding of his apartment. We then questioned him regarding the apparel, the clothing that he would wear during his dismemberment of the bodies. He stated that whenever he dismembered his victims, he was always completely naked. He wore no shoes, socks, or any type of clothing. He Stated this was not done, in fact, because of sexual gratification, but simply for necessity because the job of cutting and dismembering his victims was quite messy, and he did not wish to get blood and body fluids on his clothing.
Now, after that, there was a time when there was a discussion with certain representatives of the Chicago Police Department that wanted to know about unsolved homicides in their community.
Yes,
And Jeffrey Dahmer did meet with them and did talk to them.
yes, he
Correct.
did.
But it was established, at least on the basis of the evidence presented, that there was no homicides in Chicago that he has been charged with or admitted to.
That's correct.
Okay, then let's go on to the next thing that he talks about, however, going to Chicago on many occasions, correct?
Yes, going to
Would
the
you-
gay bars and the bathhouses.
Would you tell us about what he says relative to that, please?
Detective Carroll and Detective Keenan from the Chicago Police Department came and into the interview room. I introduced him to Mr. Dahmer, and he was questioned regarding his frequent excursions down to Chicago. Mr. Dahmer stated that he visited the Chicago gay area approximately 10 or 11 different occasions, and that while he was there, he usually frequented the gay taverns located on Clark Street or Halsted Street. He specifically mentioned men's bathhouses, one by the name of Man's Country Bathhouse located on Clark Street in Chicago, and the Unicorn Club, which is also a gay bathhouse located on Halsted.
Go ahead.
The detectives from Chicago also asked Jeffrey if he made any personal acquaintances while in Chicago, at which the suspect answered that all the male homosexuals he met in Chicago were strictly one-night stands. He did not become personally involved with any of them. He also stated he never left the gay area or the gay bathhouses with any of his acquaintances or accompanied them to their personal homes or apartments. He stated that the males he met in Chicago were of all different racial and ethnic backgrounds, including both black and white males. He also stated that on several occasions while he was visiting bathhouses in Chicago, he brought his sleeping pills and used them in a rum concoction to drug several of his gay pickups, as he called them, during the one-night stands. He stated that only one of them realized he had been drugged, and the following morning accused him of putting something in his drink and struck him about the face before leaving. He stated he was never reported to any of the owners of the bathhouses or to the Chicago police regarding his activities. Upon being questioned further of his activities in Chicago, he stated to the detectives that he received his information regarding gay bars, gay bathhouses, and gay functions in the Chicago area by reading gay publications, which can be picked up readily in various locations, both in Milwaukee and in Chicago. This time, Mr. Dahmer denied any involvement in any violent or homosexual acts while he was in the Chicago area, and stated the only two males which he had met in Chicago and brought to Milwaukee and subsequently murdered are the individuals whom he has already discussed with the Milwaukee police, and those incidences have been documented thoroughly. This time, these detectives concluded their interview.
And now another set of detectives come in from West Dallas.
Right?
Tell us what happens in that.
Your Honor, before we go on, I think there may have been a misreading of one word. I believe he read violent or homosexual acts when it says violent or homicidal acts,
Okay,
and there's a big difference.
Yes,
you agree?
I agree.
Thanks. Thank you. Go ahead, tell us what happened then at the conclusion of that discussion. Continue right on, did it?
At this time, detectives from West Dallas Department arrived, and I also had to speak to Mr. Dahmer again regarding the previous interview, Detective Nowak and Detective Lieutenant Reese. And a question regarding the possibility of any bones or materials left over from his victims, which he had murdered at his grandmother's house. The purpose of this was to determine whether or not a search warrant would be needed in order to dig up the areas around his grandmother's house. At this time, Mr. Dahmer stated that there would be no need to for a search warrant because all the bones were disposed of in the trash and carried from the home. He denied burying any of the bones or personal effects of his victims, which he killed in West Dallas, anywhere on the property, and he denies spreading the bones around any other area in West Allis. He stated that all of his victims were disposed of through the trash and taken away by the West Allis Public Trash Collection. He was then questioned regarding the instruments he used to cut up his victims in West Allis, to which he stated he is unsure what type of knife he used. However, he is positive it is not a kitchen utensil, which is from his grandmother's kitchen. He states he bought the knife and disposed of the knife the same way he did of the bodies, that being through the trash. Question regarding the Richard Guerrero identification. The West Allis detectives were interested in how he was positive that the victim that he had killed was in fact Mr. Guerrero, and he stated that after viewing the ID photo provided by the Milwaukee police, he was also given newspaper pictures dated during the time element in which Mr. Guerrero was missing, and stated that he distinctly remembered reading a newspaper article, seeing the picture of this victim in the newspaper, and realizing that it was in fact the victim he had brought back to his grandmother's house, and this is why he is sure Guerrero is in fact one of his victims. Lastly, the detectives inquired about the victim, Mr. Sears. He stated he met him at the door at closing time at the Lacage on 2nd and National. They had been drinking, and the victim, Sears, was standing with a white male. He stated he was actually approached by Sears, and that the conversation that followed, he asked if Mr. Sears would be interested in accompanying him back to his grandmother's house for some homosexual activity and drinks. Stated Mr. Sears was more than eager to accompany him and was actually more the aggressor in this encounter. He stated that the friend of Sears, a white male who drove him back to his grandmother's location in his vehicle, and that he and Sears sat in the back on the way to his grandmother's house. And on the way, the victim, Sears, performed an act of oral sex on him. This time, the detectives concluded their interview.
Were you able to determine who the driver of that vehicle was?
I was not at the time, no.
Okay, continue on. Detective Murphy, on July the 30th, you continued to question Mr. Dahmer, and as a result of that, you wrote a narrative, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, can you tell us what in that narrative is information that is not been told so far in the confession that is relevant concerning information you received from Mr. Dahmer?
He was questioned regarding questions that I had received from Bath, Ohio officers regarding disposal of the clothes and where he disposed of them, and also regarding the dog that he had hung in a tree in his earlier years, where it was.
Basically, that's the same thing that he had told you before, that it was roadkill, that he opened it up and removed the inside and he hung it in a tree.
Right, and he was also questioned regarding where he had thrown the knife he used in a homicide in Ohio, and also the necklace that the victim had worn, and he told me he threw it in the Cuyahoga River, which upon a search it was discovered. But he showed me what location he threw it, and I was able to relay this information to Bath, Ohio.
And then once again, you talked to him about him being stopped by the police. Was this information relative to that first instance when he was stopped by the police consistent with what he told you earlier?
Right, it just went into a little more detail.
Can you tell us what more detail there was, please?
I questioned him regarding the stop that happened in June of 1978 in Bath, Ohio, when he was stopped by the police when he had the bags of his first victim in the back of the car. He stated that the police stopped him around 3 a.m. in the morning. He was driving left of center. He stopped, he was detained for approximately 1/2 hour, was given a test for drunken driving. He was made to walk the line, do the finger to nose test, which he passed both of them. He was eventually given a ticket. He stated that when he was stopped, there was one car and one officer, but this officer apparently called for backup and another officer arrived. They asked him if he had been drinking. He stated he wasn't. They asked him I asked him how he acted when the police stopped him. He stated he was very nervous, but he tried to act calm. I asked him if the police looked in his car, and he stated yes, with their flashlights. They asked him what the bags were in the back seat. He stated there were 3 bags in the back seat, and he informed the police that it was garbage, that he had not had a chance to take to the landfill, and he was going to do it tomorrow. I asked him if there was an odor coming from these bags, and he stated in the bags that contained the body parts, and he stated that there may have been a slight odor, he is not sure, but he believes he had the windows of the cars rolled up. I asked him what was the reason. He told the officers that he was out driving around, and he stated he told them that his parents were recently divorced and he couldn't sleep, so he just went out for a drive to get this off of his mind. I asked him if he was arrested previously, and he stated to the best of his knowledge he had not been arrested prior to this stop, and he subsequently received a ticket for driving left of center. I asked him what his intentions were with the 3 bags containing the body parts. He stated he had intended to take them and throw them down the gully in the road, but when he got to that location, he was stopped by the police. Once he was issued the ticket, he made a U-turn, proceeded back to his residence, and placed the bags of the bones and body parts in the drainage pipe behind his house. I asked him how long from the murder, or how long this was since the murder. He stated it was possibly the next day or so, and he did this with the intention of disposing of the body in this manner. But being that he was stopped, he left the bags in the drainage pipe for a week or 2. Removed them, subsequently either broke them up with a large rock or a sledgehammer and disposed of them in the cliff in his yard. He stated that at the time the police were talking to him, he was near the side of his car. They made him walk to the rear where they performed the drunken driving tests and field sobriety tests, which he passed. He stated he could not recall the knife he used to cut up the body, only that it was possibly one from his house, and he threw it in the river with the victim's necklace. I then contacted the Bath, Ohio Police Department and informed them of this interview.
On the 30th, again, did you continue to talk with him on that date?
Yes.
Tell us about that conversation, please.
We questioned him regarding victim number 1, who he stated died at the Ambassador, and related he met this individual about 1 week before Thanksgiving in 1987. He stated he rented a room at the Ambassador and had previously prepared the sleeping pills in a glass by breaking the pills down to a powdery form and leaving this form in the glass. He stated that when he and the victim returned to the hotel, he made a rum and coke in this glass with the pills. He gave this drink to the individual, and the individual subsequently passed out. Mr. Dahmer stated he also drank a lot and was lying in bed with this individual, and he passed out. When he awoke, he discovered the victim dead and blood coming from the side of his mouth. He stated that he also noticed on the victim severe bruising on his chest, and that he, Mr. Dahmer, had bruising on his forearms, so he surmised that he had beaten the victim about the chest, possibly killing him. After this occurred, Mr. Dahmer took the room for another night, proceeded to the Grand Avenue Mall where he purchased a large suitcase. He stated the suitcase had a zipper with a leather buckle going around the suitcase. He placed the victim in the suitcase and conveyed him to his grandmother's residence in a cab. Once at his grandmother's residence, he used a knife to dismember the body, and he disposed of the body parts in the trash. He stated he did not use his grandmother's knife, but used one of his knives that he possibly bought at the mall. He is not sure, and he stated he also did dispose of the suitcase. We questioned him further regarding the use of sleeping pills, and he stated that in all the cases, he would have sleeping pills broken down into a powder form in the bottom of either a glass or a cup. And when he would prepare the drink for the individual, using either coffee, rum, or coke, he would use a glass or cup that contained the powdered sleeping pills substance. It would dissolve readily, and the victim would be unable to determine anything was in his drink. This time the interview stopped.
Now, let us go then on to the next time you had contact with him. It would have been on that same date?
The next time was the 31st.
Tell us about that, please.
Again, Detective Kenny and myself questioned him regarding recent newspaper stories that stated as an 8-year-old boy in Ohio, he was sexually assaulted by a neighbor. To this, Mr. Dahmer stated it was untrue, that the first time he experienced any sexual behavior as when he was approximately 14 years old, and that was with a young man who lived in the neighborhood. He stated that this individual was 1 or 2 years younger than him, and they mutually consented and got together on several occasions in a treehouse where they usually kissed and touched each other's body. We then questioned Mr. Dahmer regarding a possible victim of his, that being a juvenile. We showed a family photo of this individual to Mr. Dahmer, and after viewing it, he stated that this in fact is the individual whom he had fought with in his apartment approximately July 8th, 1990.
This was after a number of people had been killed, huh?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
He stated that the day previous to the fight with this individual, he had met this juvenile at the Phoenix Tavern and asked him to accompany him to his apartment.
Can you tell us how old the juvenile was at the time of this incident?
I believe he was 14?
Well, his date of birth is October 74.
60.
16.
He was 15 at the time.
15 going on 16.
15 going on 16.
Thank you. Continue on.
As I say, he met him at the Phoenix Tavern and asked him to accompany him to his apartment for some homosexual activity and offered him money to pose for nude photos. He stated at this occasion a juvenile readily accompanied him home to his apartment and they had normal homosexual sex. He said they spoke of meeting again the following night at the Phoenix bar. He stated that the juvenile left on his own accord that night. Mr. Dahmer stated the following night he went to the Phoenix Tavern on South 2nd Street where he again saw this individual. He stated at this time the juvenile again voluntarily decided to return with him to his apartment, and they took a taxi from the Phoenix to 23rd and Wells. They got out there and walked. Mr. Dahmer stated he stopped, bought himself some cigarettes, and from there they walked to his apartment building. He stated the reason why he would have the taxi drop him off several blocks from his apartment was in order to keep the taxi driver from knowing exactly where he lived and to see if anyone had been following him, as he did not want anyone to detect his activities. He stated after buying the cigarettes, they walked to his apartment, and once inside, they had conversation. However, he cannot recall what it was. He stated that at this time, he asked this individual if he would get undressed and allow him to take several photos of him in the nude. The individual complied. He had him lay on the bed and he took several photos. However, they did not come out. He asked the individual to turn on his stomach so he could take some back shots with his Polaroid, at which time he did. Mr. Dahmer stated that he started to become intoxicated and had run out of sleeping pills to put into this individual's rum and coffee quotient in order to give it to the victim. He stated in preparation for this evening and knowing he was out of sleeping pills, he had gone to a hardware store and purchased a rubber mallet hammer.
Now, what he was doing was telling you that he was running out of sleeping pills to give to his victims, whomever they might be.
Right.
Okay, and then because of that, he was trying to find a different way, and he went out and got this rubber mallet hammer.
Right.
Okay, now, at the time that you're talking to him about this young man, did you know of that young man's identity, or is this voluntary information from Mr. Dahmer about this incident?
We knew his identity.
Okay. Continue on, please.
He stated that he purchased this hammer because it was cheaper than filling his prescriptions, which cost approximately $30. He stated his intention was to strike the victim on the head with the hammer, to knock him out so that he would be able to strangle the victim while he was unconscious. He stated at this time the individual was lying on his stomach. He retrieved the hammer and struck the victim in the back part of his neck. He felt that by striking him in the back of the neck, it would cut off the blood, go into his brain, and cause the victim to pass out. However, this only made the victim angry, and at this time they got into a physical fight. And he stated that during the fight, he tried to explain to this individual that he only struck him because he thought he was going to take his money, rob him, and run out without giving him his photos. After fighting for a while on the front floor, the victim promised that he would not call the police and was allowed to leave the apartment. He stated the victim left the apartment, apparently went to the phone booth on the corner in order to call for a ride home, but after discovering that he had no cash, the victim returned to the apartment and knocked on the door. Mr. Dahmer opened the door, admitted the victim into his room, and they sat in his bedroom and spoke about the incident all night.
They both were on the bed sitting and talking.
Yes.
Okay?
Mr. Dahmer stated there was no homosexual sex between them for the rest of the evening, and he simply sat up all night discussing the fact that Mr. Dahmer had struck him with the hammer and whether or not this juvenile was going to report him to the police. Mr. Dahmer stated he felt comfortable that the talk he had with this individual regarding the entire incident had calmed down to the point where the individual was not going to complain to the police about him. And early the next morning, he allowed this individual to leave the apartment. He stated he does not recall seeing this individual again after this incident, and this is all the information he's able to give us regarding this.
Was the information that he gave you consistent with any information you knew from any source, including in juvenile?
Yes, it was relatively consistent with what information we had.
Did you tell Mr. Dahmer the allegations were made against him by this juvenile before you started talking to him about the incident? Or did you ask him what happened in the incident and he told you?
We asked him if he had ever had brought anyone to his apartment and had struck him with any type of instrument, and they subsequently were released and he informed us of this incident, right?
And then he told you about the episode.
Right.
You didn't tell him the information you had, you let him tell the story.
That's correct.
And the story that he told you substantially, the story that you had from another source?
Yes.
Okay, continue on, please. I think we're on page 84.
Right, we showed Mr. Dahmer photographs of individuals regarding other investigations and asked him questions whether or not he knew any of these missing people or was implicated or had any knowledge of any other homicides outside our jurisdiction, which he denied.
Okay, but you make note that you asked him numerous questions regarding your investigation and he answered them freely.
Yes.
Okay. Then did you go into questions about his apartment and article used during the commission of the offenses?
Right, we questioned him. We also received a call from Miami, and we questioned him regarding...
Oh, I'm sorry. Anything to do relative to anything of substance in Miami?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, we then questioned him regarding his apartment and articles used during the commission of the offenses, and he stated that he used drill bits to drill holes in the heads to flush them out, and these drill bits should be in a box, or they were in a box in his apartment, and they were on his floor. He stated the police should have had recovered these items because they were in his apartment at the time he was arrested. He also stated that the spray paint that he used, which was a fake granite-type bluish color, should have a pamphlet in one of his drawers in the residence. He does not recall the brand name, but the can was light-complected. He again stated he bought this at Pallett's Art Shop on Water Street. This was checked out by another detective. Regarding the makeup used to color the genitals that he kept of one of the victims, he stated he bought the skin tone type makeup at a store in Southridge. It was a specialized makeup that was used for hiding marks or discolored skin. He stated the reason he colored this was because he wanted it to be more of a flesh color. We then asked him questions regarding where he had gone on vacation. He stated the only vacation was in 1976 when he went with the family to Puerto Rico for a 2-week vacation. He also stated that during all the initial meetings with his victims, he always offered money for sex, taking photos, watching videos, or a combination of these. But he stated it was not for heavy sex, he just hoped it would lead to that. We questioned him again regarding some of the victims, and he stated one of the victims, namely Ed Smith, who was a bald-headed guy, victim number 6. And we asked him if he knew this individual by nickname of Sheik. He stated he did not know his real nickname. He did not know his real name nor his nickname, but this individual did wear a headband, like an Arab-type headband. He stated he did take photographs, but he tore them up and threw them out. He stated that most of the homicides took place either on weekends or when he had time off from work. He also stated he does not drive a car, never owned a car in Wisconsin, and that he accepted rides home from factory workers a couple of times from his supervisors, but he never used his car or anyone else's while in Wisconsin. Mr. Dahmer, again at this time, stated that he was not involved in any other homicides, and that if he can recall any information, he would help us in our investigation. He would either contact myself or Detective Kennedy with this information. Mr. Dahmer had in his possession at that time a book he had received in the mail from Vanity Fair magazine. This book was titled Killing for Company by Brian McMasters. This book depicted a case of a suspect, Dennis Nielsen, who would kill people, dismember them, and throw them in plastic bags and dispose of them. This case is possibly similar to Mr. Dahmer's, and the magazine requested an interview from him. This information was given to his attorney in our presence, and she kept a copy of the book.
As it relates to that, did not Mr. Dahmer indicate to you that he'd never read nor heard of anything relative to this, Mr. Nilsson?
That's correct.
And you know for a fact that he did not talk to Vanity Fair, don't you?
That's correct.
Okay, continue on.
At this time, we set up an appointment to obtain an order produced for August 1st to meet at the CIB with Mr. Dahmer, his attorney, Wendy Patricus, and show him additional photos that we expected to arrive of possible other victims.
The next time you met with him was on the same day, was it?
Right.
There was some discussions about matters relating to periods of time he might have been in Germany,
Yes, there was.
whether or not he knew anything about German, spoke it, etc., right?
That's correct.
And then there was more talk again about who he was stationed with, etc., in his military career.
Yes.
Did you learn anything from that interview that you did not already know?
We just went through his basic lifestyle pattern from when he was born, when he went to school.
So you were doing a chronology of his life.
Right. Timeline going into his life for a while.
This was capsulizing what you had already been told in one new session with him that was consistent with what he had told you earlier.
Yes.
Okay. On page 87, he starts talking to you about his fantasy, and he tells you something about his interests in women and juveniles. You see that towards the bottom of page 87. After he left Germany.
Right.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
What's he say relative to that?
His question regarding activities in Germany, he stated that he didn't have any relatives living in Germany, and then he stated that he has been a homosexual all his life. He stated he is not interested in women or not intentionally in juveniles, and he stated the age group he participated with homosexuals ranged from late teens, 18, 19, to the middle to early 20s. He stated if the individual is younger but looks older, he will attempt to have a relationship with him. In regards to the number of victims in the United States, Mr. Dahmer admits to killing 17 people. Of these, one is out of Wisconsin, Bath, Ohio, his first victim in '78. And the other victims were all in the Milwaukee County area.
Yep. Now, in that regard, the next thing that you do is you go through again a list of when he did his homicides and what year, and that's already been made known to the jury by dates, and that's substantially true and correct, right?
Yes.
Okay, so there's no sense of having to repeat them. But what was shown to the jury as to these names of the people and the dates of their death is consistent with what he told you at this interview.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, what did he say as far as sexual preference, et cetera, concerning these people?
As far as his sexual preference, he says race, religion, or education of the individual that the suspect preferred. The suspect stated that it was not a matter of race, religion, or education. It was just a matter of opportunity. He stated that he offered each one of these individuals money to be photographed, to view videos, or to have sex. And after he persuaded them to come to his apartment, he would give them a sleeping potion. And once they went to sleep, he would strangle them either manually or with a strap, photograph most of them after death, sometimes have sex with them after death, and subsequently dismember them. And apparently 11 of his victims kept the skulls and approximately 4 torsos, the hands, a couple hearts, and other inner organs.
Now, in that regard, did the body's framework of these victims, were they pretty much within what Mr. Dahmer told you he was interested in?
Yes,
And also, physique-wise, they were pretty much all about the same physique style.
yes.
So you know of nothing that you knew that contradicted what he said his interest was, and did you accept the fact, as you had testified to yesterday and have read again here today, that these were not killings of a sexual preference nature or any hatred for any person because of race, color, creed, or sexual preference?
That's correct.
You were satisfied he was telling you the truth?
Yes,
And it is true, is it not, that almost all of these victims were about the same physique, the same physical makeup?
yes, some were a little more muscular, but they all had basically what he had desired.
Okay. We now are going into the date of the 31st of July. Is that accurate on page 90?
Yes, it is.
Okay, would you tell us about that interview? That's a Wednesday now. This is a week and 2 days after he is, actually it's a week and 1 day after he's arrested, correct?
Yes.
Okay, tell us what he tells you at that time.
We asked him whether or not he'd be willing to answer some questions regarding the last offense, namely attempt homicide, which led to his arrest. Mr. Dahmer stated he did not need his attorney present, that he has cooperated with us fully and will continue to cooperate with us. He wished to tell us about what he recalls of this incident.
Please tell us.
Mr. Dahmer stated that about a week prior to this offense, which had occurred on July 22nd, 1991, he met the subject, Tracy Edwards, at the bus stop in front of the Eagles Club on 24th in Wisconsin. Mr. Dahmer stated that he was sitting there drinking a beer and thinking when the victim asked Mr. Dahmer for a cigarette. There was some small talk and the victim got on the bus. Mr. Dahmer stated about a week later, he was having pizza, actually 7/22/91. He was having pizza and beer at the Grand Avenue Mall. After finishing this, he walked down the 3rd Street front entrance of the mall and he saw the victim and 2 of his friends, the victim meaning Tracy Edwards. He stated that he approached them and they had small talk, and this was about 5 or 6 p.m. He then asked the victim if he wanted to make approximately $50 to $75 to go home with him so that he can take some pictures of him and watch some videos. He indicated the victim then went over and talked to his friends, and they agreed to go to his apartment. He stated they all walked over to the liquor store, the victim and both of his friends, which is on 6th in Wisconsin. He then went into the liquor store, bought a bottle of rum and Coke, and he believes a 6-pack of beer. He related that as he walked out, the victim's 2 friends were gone, so he and the victim proceeded to the Greyhound bus station where they took a taxi. He got out of the taxi in front of the Eagles Club on 24th in Wisconsin so that nobody would know where he lived, and they walked to his residence. He indicated they walked through the back door because that's the way he always goes. It's the door closest to his apartment. He stated once he got into the apartment, he made a drink of rum and Coke, and he did not have any sleeping pills left, so it was just rum and Coke. He stated they were sitting there drinking and talking about going to gay bars in Chicago, and he started watching videos, namely Exorcist 2. Then started talking about taking some pictures, namely bondage pictures. He told the victim that he wanted to handcuff him. He stated he got the first handcuff on him, and as they were sitting on the edge of the bed in the bedroom. Mr. Dahmer stated that then things began to get fuzzy, and he does not remember having a knife or putting a knife up to the victim. He stated he must have blacked out. He also stated that he does not remember telling the victim anything about showing him things that he would not believe.
Well, let me just interject at this time. At this time, you have a statement from Tracy Edwards.
Yes, we do.
And you are asking him questions and telling him some of the things that Tracy Edwards said.
Yes.
And he is responding to that when he said he doesn't know anything about showing him things or that things that Tracy Edwards would not believe. He said he didn't remember saying that.
That's correct.
But that's based upon information you received from Tracy Edwards.
Yes.
Okay, continue on, please.
Mr. Dahmer stated that he recalled hearing a knock at the door, which he answered. He observed 2 police officers along with the victim standing in the hallway. He related that he invited them in, and the victim still had the handcuff on his wrist. The next thing he can recall is that one of the police officers went into the bedroom, and when he heard him say, "Cuff him," at which time the other officer placed handcuffs on Mr. Dahmer. He indicated when he placed the handcuffs on him, he began to struggle. He stated he continued to struggle even when the officers opened the refrigerator door. I asked Mr. Dahmer whether or not he told the officers where the handcuff key was because the officers could not remove the cuffs, and he stated he might have said that it was in the bedroom, but he doesn't remember.
And the reason you asked him that is because one of the police officers told you that Mr. Dahmer told him that the cuff was in the bedroom.
Yes,
I mean, the key was in the bedroom.
he was in the bedroom.
But then when you asked him about that, he said he doesn't remember. He might have, but he doesn't remember saying it.
Yes.
Okay, continue on.
He also related that he didn't remember showing any photos to the victim, nor does he remember threatening the victim with a knife. He did state that the reason he uses handcuffs is so that he can keep control of his victims. He stated that he keeps the knife in the bedroom. Mr. Dahmer was asked if he remembered stating anything to the victim about threatening him or about cutting his heart out, and he stated he does not recall doing this.
But he's not denying it. He's just saying he doesn't recall doing it because of his condition.
That's correct.
But he isn't saying it didn't take place.
That's right.
Okay, continue.
Mr. Dahmer was asked why he fought with the police, and he stated it was probably because he did not want to be arrested and that he did not want them to see what was in the refrigerator. Mr. Dahmer stated he cannot recall anything regarding this due to the fact that he had been drinking and he thought he was intoxicated.
Let me ask you, did any police officers or Tracy Edwards tell the Milwaukee Police Department that in fact Mr. Dahmer was intoxicated?
Not that I know of.
The officers who said him never made a report that said he was intoxicated.
No.
Did you ask Mr. Dahmer about that you thought you were intoxicated, the officer said you weren't? Did you ask him to explain that further?
Yeah, he said he didn't remember. It was fuzzy.
Okay, thank you. Continue on, please.
Mr. Dahmer did recall when the police arrived, but stated he does not recall the victim leaving, nor does he know when the victim left his apartment. We then asked him where the handcuff key was, and he stated that he threw the handcuffs and key in the garbage earlier and retrieved the handcuffs and not the key. He states he would have been unable to remove the cuffs if he had placed them on the victim unless he removed the hands of the victim.
Did that conclude the interview concerning the incident with Mr. Tracy Edwards?
Yes.
Okay. What is the next thing that occurred relative to Mr. Edwards on that day? Was that the end of working with him on that day?
Yes, it was.
Next time you saw him was on August the 1st, is that right?
Yes.
Tell us about what happened on that day.
We again obtained an order to produce from the county jail and escorted Mr. Dahmer over to the Criminal Investigation Bureau, where we were met by his attorney, Wendy Patricus, and in the interview room, and we talked to him regarding activities in Bath, Ohio, specifically the location where he had disposed of the knife. I had received a faxed copy of a map of the sewage treatment plant area and showing the bridges where Mr. Dahmer had previously indicated where he had disposed of the knife, and he placed an X in the area where he thought the knife would be. This was then sent back to Bath so they could assist in their search of the river. We then asked him several questions regarding the homicide scene and as to whether or not he had broken the knife he used and dropped it where the bones were recovered, which he stated he did not. We asked him if his parents knew anything about the homicide or any of the other homicides that he stated that they did not know anything regarding his activities. We also informed him that pruning shears were found at the location where the bones were discovered in Bath, Ohio, and he stated he did not use pruning shears, nor does he know anything about it. We also informed him that there was a toolbox recovered in the crawl space under his house in Bath, Ohio, and he did not have any knowledge of this. This information was passed on to the Bath, Ohio Police Department.
In the course of your investigation, there was a lot of people and a lot of inquiries as to whether or not Mr. Dahmer might have been responsible for unsolved homicides, correct?
Yes, there was.
And those matters were discussed with Mr. Dahmer,
Yes, they were.
and he denied.
That's correct.
And even though he was asked about him and deny him, that information is part of the records as to what he was asked about and who he was asked about, correct?
Yes.
Okay, but for the purposes of our discussion here this morning, since there's been no independent evidence that he was lying to you about those, we'll just continue on as to the homicides that we're talking about, all right?
That's correct.
So that would take us up to page 95.
Yes.
Does Mr. Dahmer at some time want to rediscuss with you the incident concerning the juvenile, the one that got away?
Yes.
Okay, and would you tell us that takes place on the August the 1st, is it?
Yes, it is.
Okay, tell us what he wants. Does he want to tell you he wants to talk about it?
Yeah, he stated he wished to speak to us again regarding his relationship with a juvenile that he had struck with a rubber mallet.
Did he tell you why he wanted to talk to you about it?
He had forgotten to mention facts regarding this relationship.
Okay.
He stated that he had seen this individual.
I got to stop you for a moment. I meant to ask you a question about Tracy Edwards. There was no homosexual conduct at all between Mr. Dahmer and Tracy Edwards,
No, he
correct?
did not mention any. Right?
Neither side. Neither Mr. Dahmer nor Mr. Edwards, right?
Right.
Okay. Please continue on where you were.
Mr. Dahmer stated that he had seen this juvenile working at the 219 Club as a cleanup helper for some time before he actually got to know him. He observed this individual cleaning up glasses, sweeping up floors in the tavern several times late in the evening. First time he met this individual was in a Phoenix tavern. He found him attractive, so he approached him and offered him $200 to return with him to his apartment, to pose nude for some pictures, and to have some homosexual sex. He stated they took a cab to his apartment on North 25th Street, where they mutually consented to engage in sexual activity, which involved kissing, masturbation, and oral sex. He stated he also took several pictures of this juvenile. However, he did not like the way they turned out, so he tore them up and threw them away. He indicated that this juvenile willingly spent the night with him on that evening, and before leaving in the morning, he advised the juvenile that he would meet him at 12 o'clock the next day and would, in fact, give him the money for the previous night's activities. They agreed to meet at 12 o'clock. Mr. Dahmer took this to mean 12 noon and decided he would, in fact, make this individual one of his victims. He stated at this time he was out of sleeping pills, which he had used on previous occasions to knock out his victims. He did not have the $30 to refill his prescription. So early in the morning, he went to the Army Navy surplus store on Wisconsin Avenue, where he purchased a plastic hammer. He stated he brought this hammer and planned to use it to strike the juvenile on the head in order to render him unconscious so they could strangle him and make him one of his victims. He related he returned to the Phoenix bar about 12 noon. However, this juvenile was not there, so he went about his business for the day. So later on in the evening, he returned to the gay area on South 2nd Street, and upon bar closing time at approximately 2:30 a.m., he again saw the juvenile standing inside the Phoenix Tavern. This time, the juvenile again agreed to accompany him back to his apartment, and he took a cab. He stated that once at the apartment, he again engaged in sex, which involved kissing, masturbation, and oral sex. Mr. Dahmer informed this juvenile he wished to take a few pictures of him in the bedroom. It was during this picture-taking section, when the juvenile was lying on his face with his back and head exposed on the bed of Mr. Dahmer, that he took the plastic hammer and struck him in the back of the neck in an attempt to render him unconscious. Mr. Dahmer stated upon striking this individual, he became angry and got up, at which time a small argument ensued. He stated the reason he struck this, he told the individual the reason he struck him was because he felt he was going to take his $200 and leave without spending the night. This juvenile did not buy that explanation, and he left stating that he was going to call the police.
Let me just stop you there for a moment. Did he know this person by name?
He did not recall his name.
Okay, continue on.
Mr. Dahmer stated this individual left the apartment and the apartment building. However, approximately 10 minutes later, he heard pounding on the outer apartment lobby door, and we went to investigate. This individual was standing there requesting to get back in and asking for money. Mr. Dahmer at this time stated the individual followed him back into his apartment, and once inside, Mr. Dahmer grabbed him by the neck and attempted to strangle him, and a fight ensued. He related they fought for a couple of minutes, then Mr. Dahmer simply stopped fighting and decided to calm the situation down by stating, "Let's talk." He stated that this juvenile agreed, although he was highly aggravated, and they went into the bedroom area where they sat down. Mr. Dahmer stated after calming him down, he asked this individual if he would in fact allow him to tie his hands behind his back, and the juvenile agreed. Mr. Dahmer stated he tied this individual's hands behind his back, however not very tight, and they continued to talk. He indicated that during the next half hour or so, this individual wiggled free from the extension cord he had tied on his hands and attempted to leave the apartment, at which time Mr. Dahmer grabbed his 6-inch bladed knife, plastic handle, and he believes the individual thought this was a gun and decided to sit down again. He related they began to talk and talked approximately until 7 a.m., at which time Mr. Dahmer stated during the talk he was trying to convince this individual not to tell the police about the night's activities, and he continued to apologize for striking him with a hammer. Mr. Dahmer stated that although he did intend to kill this individual and make him one of his victims, and because of the previous night's sexual activity and the fact that they had spent hours talking, he began to sober up and know this individual on a more personal level and had decided he would not kill him. He indicated that at approximately 7 a.m. in the morning, he walked this individual to the bus stop on 24th in Wisconsin and gave him money for cab fare. He indicated that this was the last time he saw this individual until about 5 or 6 months later as he was walking in the Grand Avenue Mall. He observed him walking in the mall as well. He stated this individual approached him and said hi. He related that there was no further conversation, but approximately March of '91, as Mr. Dahmer was again sitting in the mall eating ice cream, this individual observed him, walked up to him, and initiated a conversation. He stated they had small talk for a while, and then they both went their separate ways.
Let me ask you a question. Did this juvenile report this matter to the police?
Yes, he did.
Was there a formal report made on it?
Yes, there was.
Is his recantation of what happened substantially the same as Mr. Dahmer's statement as to what happened?
There's some similarities, yes.
Did you ask Mr. Dahmer why it was that he let this young man go and not kill him, whereas he didn't let others go, that he brought up for actually and basically the same reason?
Yes, he said he developed a more personal relationship. He sobered up and decided he wouldn't kill him.
But he also indicated and stressed that he got to know him on a more personal level.
Yes,
And he let him go.
yes.
Okay. When's the next time you talk to Mr. Dahmer relative to these matters?
Friday, August 16th.
Friday, August 16th?
Yes.
Okay. Let me ask you, let me just state for the record, Your Honor, and counsel for the state, and I have discussed this, that on October the 2nd, as part of the exhibit that has been marked and received, specifically pages 113 through 120, is a narrative formulation by Detective Murphy as to identifying matters relative to all of the victims that had been the object of Mr. Dahmer's conduct. Since all of this has been testified to in one fashion or another, this is a culmination of many reports wherein he recites information concerning each and every one of the victims, and since it's nothing new that hasn't already been read, I will not take the time to read it now, but it will be part of the exhibit. No-
That's correct with the one correction, and I believe it is August 2nd.
Oh, I'm sorry, August the 2nd. And that's pages 113 through 120. It would just be completely repetitious. Now, would you tell us whether or not you talked to him on August the 5th concerning any matters?
On August 5th, and any other interviews until August 16th were conducted by Detective Kennedy with Detective James DeValcanier, due to the fact that I was not around at the time.
If you don't have any objection, I don't. I'd like to have him read them unless you want me to read them.
Absolutely no problem.
Why don't you read then, continue on reading what your co-workers and co-officers put down in their reports relative to the matters that we're talking about, okay?
Okay,
I mean, you know these to be substantially true and correct, do you not?
that's correct.
Okay, so in official police reports?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
On August 5th, Detective Kennedy and DeValcanier questioned him regarding other missings or other homicide victims from other jurisdictions on page 121.
How about 122 and 123?
122, they began the question regarding victims from Milwaukee, at which time Mr. Dahmer was showed a family photograph regarding possible victim, that being Stephen Tuomi, T-U-O-M-I. Mr. Dahmer viewed the photograph and positively identified him as being the individual who he first murdered in Milwaukee at the Ambassador Hotel. Detective DeValcanier filed a supplementary report regarding this identification. He stated at this time he thought, "It's going to take more than this to make me stumble,"
That's a quote of his. It's going
That's
to
a
take
quote.
more than that to make me stumble.
as he was continually fighting his homosexual urges. However, he stated that it was shortly after this incident in the library that he again began frequenting gay bookstores, gay bars, gay baths, and he feels that this was a catalyst which started him again into his homosexual lifestyle, which eventually led to his killing and dismembering of victims.
He then is met by the department's people again, Detective Kennedy and, how do you pronounce it,
DeValcanier.
and they want to talk to him about Mr. Tuomi.
Yes.
Tell us what was said.
Mr. Dahmer viewed the photos which had been received of Stephen Tuomi, and he positively identified this as being the person that he had encountered in November of 1987. These photographs were obtained from the family. Mr. Dahmer related that at the time he had been in front of the 219 Club at Tavern on South 2nd Street at about closing time. He encountered Mr. Tuomi while he was waiting at a bus stop. He had already obtained his hotel room at the Ambassador, which he believes is located on 24th in Wisconsin. He'd gotten the room earlier with the plan that if he had encountered someone, he would take them there for the purpose of having sex with them. He had already purchased some sleeping pills, which he had at the room for the purpose of rendering anyone he brought back there helpless so he could have sex with them. He spoke with Tuomi and asked him if he wanted to spend the night with him at the hotel room. Tuomi agreed. Dahmer does not recall if he offered him money to come to the room or not. Upon arrival at the hotel, both Dahmer and Tuomi got undressed and laid on the bed. At that time, they had what Mr. Dahmer called light sex. He described this as hugging, kissing, and mutual masturbation. After about an hour or two, Mr. Dahmer made a drink for Mr. Tuomi, at which he put the sleeping pills. Mr. Tuomi drank this, fell asleep, and Mr. Dahmer kept drinking and eventually fell asleep himself. Mr. Dahmer related that when he woke up, he was lying on top of Mr. Tuomi, and Dahmer's forearms were visibly bruised. He saw that Mr. Tuomi was obviously dead. He was bleeding from the head, and his chest was crushed in, and some of the bones were broken. At this time, Mr. Dahmer carried Mr. Tuomi and placed him in the closet in the hotel room. He sat around the hotel room for a couple hours trying to figure out what to do. At about noon, he went to the Grand Avenue Mall, bought a large suitcase with wheels on it, and returned to the Ambassador Hotel. During that time, he may have some beers, and he left the hotel room to get a bite to eat. At about 5 p.m., he returned to the hotel room, placed Mr. Tuomi in a large suitcase. He related that it was very tight fit, but he was able to get him into the suitcase. He stated he purchased a room for another night and remained in the room until about 1 a.m. At that time, he left the room with the suitcase, taking an elevator to the ground floor. He got a cab, and upon approaching the cab, had the driver help him place the suitcase in the back seat of the cab. He then took the cab to his grandmother's house on South 57th Street. Upon arrival at the grandmother's house, Mr. Dahmer put the suitcase in the fruit cellar in the basement. He left the suitcase there for about a week. He said he did this because it was Thanksgiving time and it was cold in the basement, and he knew this would slow the decomposition of the body. After about a week, he got the suitcase out of the fruit cellar and removed the body from it. After removing the body from the suitcase, he used a knife to open the body and then stripped the flesh from it. Placed the flesh in plastic bags. He then used the old sheet which had been in the basement to wrap the bones. He then crushed the bones with a sledgehammer. He related that he wrapped the bones in the sheet so that when he was crushing them, the splinters and fragments of bones would not fly all over the basement. He then put these items in the trash. Regarding the Ambassador Hotel, Mr. Dahmer related that on 4 or 5 previous occasions to his encounter with Mr. Tuomi, he had rented a room for the purpose of having sex with someone he would meet. He indicated at no previous times had he killed anyone there, and nothing had happened. They then received information from Bath, Ohio regarding a receipt they had recovered indicating that Mr. Dahmer had purchased a gun
When was that gun supposedly purchased, Jerry?
on January 23rd, 1982.
82?
Yes.
Okay.
He was questioned regarding its ownership, and Mr. Dahmer related that while working at the Plasma Center, he had purchased a .357 snub-nose revolver. He thinks he bought the gun in 82 or 83. He related that he only owned this gun for about 1 year and used it for target shooting at the range. He bought the gun at the gun shop in the area of 83rd and Lincoln. He paid $350 for it. He did not remember the cost of using a range. He was then showed a fax copy of the receipt for the purchase of the gun bearing his signature, and he identified this copy and receipt and stated he received this when he bought the gun, and the signature on the receipt was in fact his. He stated when his grandmother found out he had a gun in the house, she did not like it. He showed her the gun shortly after that. His father visited from Ohio, and his grandmother told his father that he had a gun, and his father took the gun from him. Mr. Dahmer believes that his father took the gun back to Ohio and sold it. Mr. Dahmer related he only bought the gun because he had enjoyed shooting while he was in the military and felt that it was something he might like to do. He related that he never owned a gun in previous interviews because he did not feel the gun had any connection with any of the victims in the homicides which he was being talked to about. He stated he never used a gun for anything other than target practice.
So because he never used a gun, he was telling you that he didn't try to lie to anyone, it just never was involved in anything he was doing anyway.
That's correct.
And he didn't have it for very long anyway.
That's correct.
Continue on, please. The next thing that Mr. Dahmer had a discussion with was some information concerning a relationship that he had with a young lady in Miami.
Miami, right?
Correct?
Yes.
Tell us about the reason that was discussed and what, if anything, did you learn from that?
We received information from Bath, Ohio Police Department that while he was living in Miami, he in fact had a girlfriend who lived with him, and he had intended to marry. To this, Mr. Dahmer stated that he was in Miami. He was working at the submarine shop called the Sunshine Submarines. He met another employee there. He stated it was a white woman with long, curly, thick black hair, and she was originally from England. He stated she was in this country illegally, and they had become friends. He states he is unsure, but he thinks her name was Julie. He states he did go out to dinner with her several times and walk along the beach. However, at no time he had any inclination for sexual activity with her. He never felt attracted to her in that way. He states they were mainly friends. He goes on to indicate that many times she advised him that she would be willing to marry an American as a marriage of convenience in order for her to obtain her naturalization citizenship. He states to the best of his recollection, she was attracted to the manager of the submarine shop. However, she did mention to Mr. Dahmer several times that she would be willing to marry him in a marriage of convenience if he would help her become a citizen. He states he did talk about that several times. However, he never, in fact, took it seriously, and because he was not interested in her sexually or as a lifetime partner, he never actually encouraged this conversation. He states after moving back to Ohio, he believes that she did either call him once or twice or write him a letter. However, he did not respond. As he had stated previously, he was not interested in pursuing a relationship with her. He denies at any time he considered her a girlfriend or had any relationship with her other than a work relationship, and he also denies that she ever lived with him in any of the hotels that he was staying while in Miami.
Did you ever have any information relative to Mr. Dahmer's sexual preference other than what he told you to be? I mean, did you ever learn that he wasn't telling you the truth about that?
No, instead he was a homosexual.
And that's all your information was, is that was consistent with the facts as you found them out?
That's correct.
Now, he had another relative living in the Milwaukee area, and he told you about how that relative had come across some information concerning odors in the grandmother's house and things of that nature.
Yes.
What would he tell people, including his relatives and his grandmother, as to what the odors that were discovered and reported out, what those odors are from?
His aunt had told his grandmother and father about the smells, and he states that he told his grandmother and the aunt that the smell was because of the cat that the grandma had by the name of Jody, had fouled the kitty litter box, which was located in the basement and had not previously been emptied. He stated at one time his aunt pressed him further, stating that it was not kitty litter smell, and at this time he made up a ploy story stating that he had found a dead raccoon and he had cut up the raccoon in the basement in order to save the bones. He stated he told this because he realized there was a smell of dismembered bodies that came from the basement. This time he was asked how this could be, and he stated that because several of his victims, although he cut them up and dismembered them over the drain pipe in the basement, he states after hosing down the basement floor and washing down the blood down the drain, he was careful that none of the body parts or chunks of flesh got into the drain. He states after disposing of the body parts and the bones and hosing down the blood, he would pour a full-gallon bottle of bleach down the drain in order to try to get rid of the smell, but the dismembered bodies would give off an awful odor, and it would linger in the basement for 1 or 2 days before it would go away. He states this is a smell that his aunt smelled, and she was the one that brought up the foul smell to his grandmother and to his father. However, he was usually able to dissuade them from investigating further by his explanations of the raccoon and the kitty litter box. At this time, a photo array of several individuals that may have been the second victim, who was still unidentified, was shown, and after viewing all these photos, he stated that none of the photos shown to him resembled the victim that he, in fact, killed at his grandmother's house.
There came a time when the Milwaukee Police Department was interested in discussing some movies that were found in Mr. Dahmer's apartment, correct?
Yes.
And that interview was conducted by Detective Kennedy.
Yes.
Tell us what was learned as a result of that. What was asked of Mr. Dahmer and how did he respond?
Mr. Dahmer started to talk about a movie which was found in his apartment, that being The Exorcist 2.
Now, for the sake of the record, is it not that it was really a movie called Exorcist 3? Or don't you know?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Continue on. Say it the way it's written, and then we can correct later.
I asked him at this time why he in fact purchased Exorcist 2, and he stated that he had seen the movie when it was first released and that he was fascinated by it. He stated he enjoyed the movie so much that when it was first released on video cassette, he spent approximately $100 to purchase a copy of it. I asked him what fascination was with the movie, to which he stated he was unsure, but he knows he felt a tremendous amount of guilt because of his actions. He stated he felt evil and thoroughly corrupt body and soul because of the horrible crimes he had committed against people. He stated that every time he would try to overcome his feelings of wanting to kill and dismember people, they would haunt him and overcome him almost like an addiction. He stated he felt that he could not fight the feeling and wondered if in fact the devil had anything to do with his evil thoughts. He states because of this he watched the movie Exorcist 2 almost on a weekly basis for approximately 6 months, sometimes 2 to 3 times a week. He states in the movie he could tell that the devil was angry for being condemned and that he could relate with the devil because he felt that his life on earth was condemned. He went on to state that the main character in the movie appeared to be driven by evil and that he could relate to this character as felt that his life was driven by evil. He was questioned regarding the heads which he had kept in his apartment. He was asked how in fact he got the brain matter out of the skulls and why the skulls looked so completely clean and dried when they were discovered. He states after killing his victims and decapitating them, he would use a small drill to drill several holes in various areas of the head and then boil the head. He stated during the boiling process he would use a large plastic syringe, which he had purchased at Ace Hardware, and he would fill the syringe with Soilex cleansing solution and boiling water and inject the solution into the holes which he had previously drilled in the heads. He stated this solution would help turn the brain matter into a mushy substance, and after approximately 1 hour of boiling, the upper vertebrae located in the neck area would become loose and he could dislodge them. He states at this time he would use a large serving spoon or utensil to dig into the back part of the skull and scoop out the brain matter which had turned to mush. After scooping out the brain matter and discarding it in the toilet, he would again place the skull in the boiling water and boil it thoroughly until it was completely clear of any flesh, hair, mucus, or brain matter. This time he was asked why he kept the heads, and in fact he considered them to be a trophy. He stated he did not consider them trophies. However, he wanted to keep the skulls of his victims because to him, the skull represented the true essence of his victims.
Let me just stop you there. Detective Kennedy, according to his reports, asked him if he considered them trophies. He said he did not consider them trophies.
Right,
He considered them the true essence of his victims.
yes.
Continue, please.
He stated he felt that by at least keeping the heads, the death of his victims would not be a total loss because the heads would be with him. He stated he eventually planned to paint all the skulls in order to keep them from being detected. However, he never got around to doing this. At this time, Mr. Dahmer stated, "It's hard for me..."
As you start here now, this is in quotes, so it's a direct quote. It's hard.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
He stated in quotations, "It's hard for me to believe that a human being could have done what I've done, but I know that I did it. I want you to understand that my questions regarding Satan and the devil were not to diffuse guilt from me or blame the devil for what I've done, because I realize that what I've done is my guilt. But I have to question whether or not there is an evil force in the world or whether or not I have been influenced by it."
And whether or not I have been influenced by it.
Right.
Go ahead.
"Although I am not sure if there is a God or if there is a devil, I know that as of lately, I've been doing a lot of thinking about both, and I have to wonder what this influenced me in my life. What has influenced me in my life?"
That's the end of the quote.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Mr. Dahmer was then asked if there were any other victims that he had neglected to tell us about, at which time he stated,
Quote.
"Pat, what good would it do for me to admit to just half of my victims or to a few of my victims, or to not tell you of a couple when I know that in the long run, it will be me that has to stand before God and admit to my wrongdoings, and He'll know if I was truthful and honest when I finally was caught. And if I help to try and clear this whole matter up, I'm telling you the truth now because I want to clear my conscience, and all that I've told you is the truth, and I've not left anything out."
End of quote.
End of quote.
And then that was the end of that interview.
That's correct.
The next time that you gentlemen speak with him is when Mr. Kennedy does. Correct?
Right.
And that has to do with the instance in Ohio and information about that. Correct?
Yes, with the Ohio officers.
Is there anything that we learned in that interview that's different than what we already know to be the fact? Why don't you read it so we don't...
Detective Kennedy met with Lieutenant Muncie and Detective Karabatzis from Ohio and questioned Mr. Dahmer regarding the Ohio incident, and also questioned him regarding a large black traveler's trunk which Mr. Dahmer had kept in a basement locked at his grandmother's house in West Dallas. He related that this was a trunk which he had used from the time he left the military service in order to travel by placing all his worldly goods in it. The reason he kept his trunk locked while at his grandmother's house was because it was this trunk that he placed all his pornographic materials, including magazines and videotapes which he purchased. He stated the trunk was locked because he did not wish his grandmother to discover that he was involved in viewing and reading pornographic material. Regarding information pertaining to the barbell, which had been mentioned in previous reports that Mr. Dahmer used to choke his victim in Bath, Ohio, officers reported that they recovered a barbell set from the suspect father. They inquired as to whether or not this was the one used to commit the offense, which time Mr. Dahmer related he used one of the dumbbells, which is a smaller handheld set of dumbbells, which he would use independently of the other barbells in the set. He again reiterated that when the victim told him he was going to leave, he struck him while he was sitting in the chair with the barbell. He then stated he used the barbell to choke the victim to death.
Okay. Lieutenant Muncie had also was talking to Mr. Dahmer and had advised him of his rights, and Mr. Dahmer waived those, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I would like you to go to the end of page 135, and just we'll end with that page and just a couple more paragraphs for the morning recess, and tell us about picking up on the discussion concerning the showing of photos of Mr. Dahmer of one of his victims.
At this time, we spoke again with the suspect regarding the second victim at his grandmother's house. This victim, as of this date, had not been positively identified. Mr. Dahmer again viewed a photo array and picked out a photo of James E. Dockstetter. He related that this photo was possibly that of the victim in question. He related that the hair is about the same, however, the photo appears to show the victim to be a bit too young. This time he was questioned as to whether or not he can remember anything regarding the victim which would help in an investigation, meaning tattoos or scars, deformities or anything, and Mr. Dahmer related that he was not sure, but the victim could have had a slight or quite faded scar on his stomach or groin area, possibly that of an appendix removal or a hernia operation. He related that although he is not completely positive, that he seems to remember that during the time of this offense, as he cut open this victim, it occurred to him that the victim possibly had only one kidney. He rated he is not completely sure of this, however, he seems to remember that upon removing the internal organs of his victim, it did not appear that all of his internal organs were there. He further related he remembers the victim being almost as tall as himself, possibly 5'10" or 5'11", with dark curly hair, medium length, and remembers the victim stating he lived in the area of 10th and National. When the victim mentioned that he had returned to his mother's house in that area earlier in the morning, this is when Mr. Dahmer decided to kill him. Mr. Dahmer recalled the possibility of the victim having a tattoo on one of his arms, but he is not sure it's possible. He cannot really remember. Mr. Dahmer was questioned regarding any further information in order to help make an identification of this individual, but he could not offer any at this time, and the interview was completed.
Okay. Your Honor, I think it's a good time to stop, and I would like to inform the court, with the approval of counsel, that when we do reconvene, I'm going to interrupt the continuation of this to call one or two witnesses, and then to ask Detective Murphy then to return to the stand for the continuation of what I think is probably another hour and a half of testimony.
Okay, I think maybe I should explain that we're breaking a little bit early. The reason we're breaking early is because Detective Murphy is required in another courtroom to give testimony in another case. And one of the things that's been going on this morning, there have been some adjustments going on in time, and we were originally going to break at 11:30, and then we got word from the other court that they would really accommodate us by taking Detective Murphy a little later. So one thing I'd like to do is thank Judge Geske for helping out in that regard. Another thing, I mentioned when we first came in that I had some earlier calendar, and there were a couple of cases that were going to have to wait till 11:30. One of those cases has been taken by my colleague, Judge Mannion, so I would like to acknowledge that help. The other one has been put over to another day, so we don't have that problem. We do have this problem. At 1 o'clock, I've directed the lawyers to be back here, and we have some legal matters to take care of.